Good Friday morning and happy Manufacturing Month, everyone. I'm Chris DiPentima, President and CEO of CBIA, the Connecticut Business and Industry Association. Along with our CONNSTEP and RSCC affiliates, I want to welcome you to the annual Made in Connecticut Manufacturing Conference. Like so many other events in 2020, this one's going to be virtual as well. And so we will be zooming in over 20 speakers today from around the state of Connecticut. Great leaders from our manufacturing ecosystem that we're proud to showcase and have them share their stories and best practices and all the innovation that they've been doing during this difficult time. I also will be doing, I want to thank our staff who is also scattered around our great state and all the coordination and time and effort that they put into making this amazing event happen. And I want to thank my crack staff that's on site here, my wardrobe consultant, my chief security officer, Jason, our production, Molly, and Katie for helping put this on. You're in for a real treat today. So grab a favorite coffee mug and settle in for a little bit. This is going to be a fantastic morning. I also want to thank the Makerspace CT, which is where we are today. I know we're not at our normal brewery that we like to have our events at, but we are thrilled to be on location here in the historic G. Fox building in downtown Hartford. I used to play in the clothes rack here when I was a young kid. And the Makerspace CT location is a beautiful 25,000 square foot spot that brings the community in to teach them great things about manufacturing, being entrepreneurs, and innovating and developing skills so that they could have an amazing career in manufacturing. And the Makerspace CT got some very exciting news yesterday. Deborah and her staff heard and announced that they were the recipients of a grant called the Innovation and Beyond 3D Printing for the New Collar Workforce. This is an amazing grant that will bring 3D and additive printing to Connecticut. And we're really excited to have that and announce it. And I want to thank Deborah and her staff one more time again for letting us use this beautiful space as our remote location today for the next few hours. And next, I also want to thank our event sponsor, TD Bank. They're a great partner and CBIA member. You'll be hearing from Mike LaBella shortly and from Steve Litchfield later in the program. They are really pillars of our membership and true believers of manufacturers in Connecticut. And we're so excited to have them as the event sponsor again for this exciting program. And I also want to thank our Manufacturing Report sponsor, Stanley Black Decker, another one of our great members at CBIA and a great pillars of the manufacturing community. You're going to have a chance to hear during our manufacturers panel from Graham Robinson, one of the amazing new additions to the great executive team over at Stanley Black Decker. And let me tell you, we are so honored and privileged to have Graham now as a resident of the state of Connecticut, having relocated here. And he's just an amazing individual. I can't wait for you all to get a chance to hear from him. And I also want to thank all of us joining as part of the Techstars Startup Week here in Hartford. This is a great event that CONNSTEP is a part of, and it brings together the community and entrepreneurs, corporate leaders, investors, academia, and other innovative leaders from around our state and the great city of Hartford, and celebrates the region's innovation and startups, entrepreneurs, and the whole ecosystem. And let me say that's just something that's so critical to us in Connecticut as we rebuild our state and come out of the COVID pandemic. Entrepreneurs, innovators are going to be the key to rebuilding our economy and working with government and growing some of our urban areas like Hartford and our other great cities across our state. We're going to have an amazing amount of entrepreneurs in Connecticut that you'll hear from this morning. And I'm excited that there's so many that are willing to join us. For those of you who maybe don't know my background, I've spent the last 18 years leading manufacturing organizations in Connecticut, The manufacturing is truly near and dear to my heart. It's in my blood. It's something that I love. And not only have I led organizations in Connecticut, but also in the United States and across the world. And I got to tell you, having experienced manufacturing at other locations, our Connecticut manufacturers are some of the most innovative and resilient that we have in the whole world. I saw firsthand what our manufacturers did when confronted head on with this COVID pandemic way back in March. How they implemented extra cleaning practices, rolled out the use of PPE, and completely shifted their workplaces to ensure proper distancing. And let me tell you, that's no small feat, to reorganize your facilities so that you can keep your amazing workforce safe during an unprecedented time. And that was the key, with keeping one of the most productive workforces in the world safe, so that we can continue to keep manufacturing going and our workforce employed, and keeping Connecticut in a position to combat not only the COVID pandemic, but the economic pandemic that followed from COVID and brought across the globe a real downturn in the economy. And when I think about the manufacturing sectors facing 20, 30, 40% revenue decreases, it's amazing that the Connecticut employment is down only about 6%. And I use the term only lightly. I mean, it's sad when we have any decrease in employment. But for our manufacturing sector, the employment level to be down only about 6% when manufacturing industries are down in double digits and beyond. We're performing better than many other industries across Connecticut and across the country. And in fact, some manufacturing sectors are extremely busy, and they're still trying to find skilled labor, which is something that we critically need to focus on, and we'll be talking a lot about later in this program. And a lot of credit goes to Governor Lamont and his team, who deemed all manufacturing essential, rather than trying to pick and choose who should stay open and who should close when we were first hit with the COVID pandemic. The governor's team also embraced a true public-private partnership by utilizing CBIA and CONNSTEP and RSCC to disseminate the very fluid COVID workplace information that was changing literally daily, if not hourly, in the early months. And they also partnered with CBIA and CONNSTEP to coordinate the distribution of free masks and thermometers to many of our small business across our great state who were in great need of that personal protective equipment. You will hear from one of the panels, which will be members of the governor's team a bit later in the program. And it's a really impressive, dynamic panel of a lot of private sector individuals who the governor has brought into the public sector to help move our state forward. As our Rebuild Connecticut policy pledge notes, this is a type of private-public collaboration that will be essential in order for us to come out of this pandemic stronger, better, and more prosperous than before. Working together is not an option. It's a must. And it's going to be the basis for our success. If you agree, I encourage you to join the over 125 policymakers and 100 businesses and sign the pledge to ensure that this collaboration exists with all of our policymakers, all of our elected officials, and all of our public sector, not only through the election, but as we move into session in January. So check it out at our rebuildct.com website and join us in this movement by signing the pledge. And finally, I'd like to close by acknowledging 4 manufacturing champions inside of our organization at CBIA, CONNSTEP, and RSCC, who, believe it or not, are retiring at the end of this year after 108 years of combined service. Now, in the manufacturing community, we've been talking for the past several years about the silver tsunami, and this is clearly evident with some of the folks that we have retiring. Our CFO of 36 years, Steve Martu, has championed our workers' comp program, which has greatly reduced costs for many Connecticut manufacturers. Something that's critically important in this great state is keeping our costs down so our manufacturers can be competitive. And our Mark Soicher, many of the human resource professionals out there know him as the go-to source for our members when it comes to workplace questions, labor questions, any question. Mark is there to have a very thoughtful and prompt answer, and he will be retiring in December as well. And of course, my predecessor, who's on a retirement tour, Joe Brennan, our current senior advisor. He's championed manufacturing policies for the last 32 years and a true believer that without manufacturing, our state would not be close to what it is today. And Bonnie Del Conte, who you'll hear from later in the program. Bonnie, the president of our affiliate CONNSTEP, has been a leader of that organization for the past 18 years. And she's spent her life creating a critical piece of the Connecticut manufacturing ecosystem, which consults with our great businesses to grow their top line, optimize their bottom line, and diversify their portfolio, which is so critical in times like this downturn, to have the diverse portfolio of different customers, different programs, and even different sectors. So I want to thank all of them for the time that they've put in and everything that they've done for our tremendous state. We all owe them a great deal of gratitude for everything that they've done. All right, next, I want to introduce a true champion of manufacturing, someone we've had the opportunity to work very closely with in recent, and not only in recent months, but really in recent years. Senator Joan Hartley has been an amazing champion of manufacturing, a great partner with CBIA and CONNSTEP and RSCC. Joan serves as chair of the Commerce Committee and co-chair of the Manufacturing Caucus. We've had the pleasure of working with her on manufacturing strategies, on testifying with her in front of the legislator to make sure our manufacturing programs continue to get supported. And Joan has more recently worked with our Connecticut Manufacturers Collaborative, the CMC, which is an organization that brought together the 7 larger Connecticut trade associations, manufacturing trade associations around our state, and has been facilitated by CBIA and CONNSTEP. And Senator Hartley was the champion behind CMC's first ask of creating the Chief Manufacturing Officer, which was later filled by Colin Cooper. And Senator Hartley, I also want to thank you. I saw that you signed the Rebuild Connecticut Policy Pledge, and I really appreciate everything you've done working with us, even on the Transfer Act, and I appreciate you being the great champion of manufacturing. So I turn over the virtual floor to you, Senator Hartley.
Well, thank you, Chris. I want to apologize. I'm having a little technical difficulty on this side, but I think you can hear me, can't you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, so Chris, first of all, congratulations to you and your new leadership role. You certainly have come in a pivotal time. With regard to the CBIA pledge, it's a new protocol for you, and it's very interesting. I'll just give you this footnote. I have never signed any surveys or things of that sort. This was the first one ever, and I've been doing this for a few years. So anyway, I want you to know that I think the work that has gone on thus far, and I know will continue to go on with regard to these very uncharted waters that we are on, is so crucial. Manufacturing has always been a very important foundation in our economic sector, and it has proven to be so even more now since March, when the world completely turned upside down on us. And you mentioned about the role that manufacturing played. Yes, indeed, manufacturers were identified as essential workforce, and that could not have been more true as we went through the pandemic, and quite frankly, as we continue to go through this, not yet out of the woods here. I want to, first of all, comment on how CBIA, CMC really stepped up and partnered in a crucial and important way with the command center. You worked hand in glove with the executive office and also the legislative branch. And really, it was because of that ability to be agile and to move quickly and to be responsive that the state of Connecticut fared so much better than many of our other states. I do want to take my hat off to the leadership of Governor Lamont, who recognized the importance of this incredible partnership. And that continues as we are going to kind of continue in this situation, which probably the world is never going to go back to what we knew before, but we've learned many lessons from that, and the manufacturing sector has really helped to lead in that. So briefly, I want to say, because you have what looks like an incredible agenda today, that it has been my pleasure to work with the CBIA and also to partner with the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative. It has been a very different dynamic working with the CMC. It has helped to cut to the chase, to identify priorities, and to really get things done. So in the very short time that has existed, I think it has a very solid track record with regard to legislative proposals and bringing together the legislature in a more organized way, so that we are not talking about sections of the state. We are talking in one voice. We are hearing your priorities, and it has helped us immensely. I also had the opportunity to participate on the weekly calls that were conducted by the CMC, and they were very instructive and informative as I then worked with my colleagues in the Senate office and also on the House level. So going forward, we are really going to depend on continuing to have this robust working relationship. I am ever grateful to have the benefit of also working with the CMO, the first ever in the state of Connecticut, the Chief Manufacturing Officer. And you probably all know that Senator Murphy is now taking a page from our playbook, and he is trying to have a federal level Chief Manufacturing Officer. So once again, Connecticut is out in front, and that is kudos, quite frankly, to the CMC and CBIA to have really championed that and brought it over the finish line. And lastly, I just want to say, so we just finished a marathon session negotiation on something that is going to be very important to manufacturers and to the economy of state of Connecticut, and that is this work that we did on the Transfer Act. And I would be remiss if I did not recognize Eric Brown. He has been at this for many years, probably more than he wants to remember. But when we get this over the finish line, and we have made a massive step in putting it forward, there is still another leg left to do on it. It will probably be the most transformative regulatory reform that this state has accomplished in probably 25 years. And I want you to know that in his quiet, humble way, Eric was the glue on getting us where we've been thus far. And I hope to continue to have the benefit of his incredible wealth of knowledge on this, because there is still yet another very important part of this to accomplish. But that and a number of other pieces of legislation are very much to the credit of the CMC and Eric as being central to this. So thank you for all that you have done, the incredible work. The members of your association have demonstrated their agility, their ability to respond, and they have been incredible employers through all of this. I have been struck by the compassion and the concern that I have heard on the weekly calls as we were going through this with their workforce. We will have much work to do going forward, and that is with regard to meeting the crucial challenge of upskilling and reskilling. The world that we know is very different, and workforce training is going to be pivotal in that. And the CBIA and CMC will be very, very important in us accomplishing that. So I want to commend you all, and I'll try to, through the morning, get back in and to listen to some of these panels. They look like they're going to be very, very interesting. Thank you, Chris, and all the members.
Senator Hartley, thank you, and thank you for joining our morning CMC call. It's been a pleasure having you on them, and obviously it's great to be able to talk to you regularly to tell you what's going on. And thank you again for signing the Rebuild Connecticut Policy Pledge. We look forward to working with you during session. Next, I want to,
Yes.
Thank you, Senator. Next, I want to introduce Michael LaBella, the commercial market president at TD Bank, who has many Connecticut manufacturing clients. I've been fortunate to get to know Michael a little bit since starting on at CBIA. And a little fun fact about Michael. So Michael's a Trumbull resident, and normally we have this summit down at the Trumbull Marriott. So he just rolls out of bed in the morning. And Michael, I don't know if you walk across the street, but I'm sure you jump in your car and drive to the summit. But today we made your commute even shorter. I think you probably just rolled out of bed and went down to the living room to join us. So I appreciate your support, your membership of CBIA and our friendship. And I turn the ball over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah, I mean, this is even better than the Trumbull Marriott. Well, I shouldn't say that because I personally much rather be together in person. But thank you and good morning. On behalf of all of us at TD Bank, we are really proud to be a sponsor of the CBIA Manufacturing Conference and Awards presentation. I'd really like to take this opportunity to congratulate all of today's award winners, their outstanding accomplishments and contributions, and really want to thank Chris for his leadership and his team for putting together events like this to keep the business community informed during these difficult times. I had a meeting last week and I found this old quote that says, there are decades when nothing happens and weeks when decades happen. We are certainly living in the latter part of that comment. I want to take a few minutes today to really talk about what banks are doing in response to, and maybe more importantly, have learned from the pandemic, especially in the manufacturing and technology segment of our economy. I want to share some best practices and really focus in areas of digitalization for improving cash management and fraud prevention. Unfortunately, fraud has become even more prevalent with remote management. And our focus for companies is to streamline and digitize processes so they can work even more and better when a crisis strikes. They turn checks into electronic payments that can be made anywhere, enhance security, and reduce risk throughout the process workflow. Why manufacturing? Well, as we saw in the opening video, manufacturing is a critical segment to Connecticut and to Connecticut banks and the state's revenue. We'll hear many of the updated facts in the next segment, but we have thousands of manufacturers in the state providing high-paying, high-tech jobs. This is a great target market for banks. Manufacturers are users of international products, including foreign exchange, bankers acceptance financing, letters of credit. And in fact, we're seeing more companies utilize letters of credit to provide pre-shipment financing to overseas and even domestic suppliers. So some interesting changes going on. Manufacturers, users of leasing, working capital financing, term debt, interest rate hedge products, and cash management services. I think is most important in Connecticut, these high-tech jobs exist because we have a workforce that ranks third for advanced degrees and fourth for productivity. And that's really a testament to our high schools, community colleges, and engineering and universities that are providing these advanced degrees for our manufacturing economy. I think the only thing we hope for is one of the crucial lessons learned this year is that business dynamics and the economic environment can change rapidly and without any warning. You know, the pandemic drove life to virtual channels at much higher rates than ever before. And I think anyone who bought Zoom at $61 and watched it go to almost 600 can relate. And unfortunately, I was not one of them. But at TD, we needed to adapt and change rapidly. Yeah, as many of you know, banks are not known to be the most nimble of industries, but we needed to be. We needed to meet the demands of our customers and the changing economy. You know, when PPP was announced, we literally changed all of our internal approval protocols and over a weekend built a new technology platform that allowed us to process over 86,000 PPP loans nationally, with over 3,700 in Connecticut, providing Connecticut companies with over $365 million in much needed cash. And this was all done online. After that, we went out and we surveyed 300 treasury managers, assistant treasurers, CFOs, and CEOs to determine the critical issues they were facing. You know, I'll give a quick summary of the results. And, you know, not unexpectedly, number one was the global health pandemic and its effect on supply chain. Number two, we'll talk probably most about increasing cyber fraud. Interest rate risks was three, trade conflicts with China, changing oil and commodity prices, and political conflicts, particularly North Korea, Middle East, and Russia. In the cash management area, companies reported holding cash for future financial investment. This increased from 24 to 32%, and increased expenditures for IT jumped from 14 to 22%. You know, we've seen that on our balance sheet in the banks. Banks' deposit rates are rising to very high levels, keeping banks very liquid. Companies also saw top challenges to be continued manual processes. When we asked companies if loans over the next year will favor borrowers or lenders, companies responded that borrowers will be favored in significantly higher numbers. And as a banker and in the banking environment, we agree with that assessment. Banks have strong liquidity, rates should remain low, but economic growth will also be low, creating increased competition among banks. Covenant packages, however, may become more restrictive due to continued uncertainty in the economy. So some of the takeaways, for the sake of time, I'm really just going to focus on the fraud prevention and payment solutions, as that's something we can better control. As I mentioned, payment fraud continues to increase, and we see it every day. A total of 81% of financial professionals reported that their organizations experienced attempted and/or actual payment fraud in 2019. The FBI reports show that business email compromise scams totaled over $26 billion. It's also worth noting that cyber attacks are more probable with outdated technology. One of our recommendations is the utilization of payment networks. So why use them? You know, they can really maximize efficiency and cost savings, reduce the time, you know, your AP staff spends on manual activities, and free them up for value-added activities. Cut down on AP payment processing costs and ensure optimal payments are used. It improves security and reduces fraud risk. You can gather, authenticate, and store vendor payment information in a central secure location, and reduce exposure to check fraud with conversion to secure electronic payments. It can optimize working capital and drive AP revenue. You can monetize a greater portion of AP spend with rebate opportunities on virtual card and ACH. Provides greater control over payment timing, and you really can turn your accounts payable process to a revenue driver. You know, the work from home environment has significantly altered business processes. We all need to prepare for the new normal with adequate technology and proper controls, and utilize automation and outsourcing when possible. So my strong recommendation, especially if you're using paper checks, is that you speak with your bank about fraud protection. You know, there's no magic bullet to stop fraud, but we put together our top 10 list for reducing the potential for fraud, really what we call security layers. And this includes network security. This is really the basic level, firewall, antivirus, anti-spyware, and then go into encryption to protect sensitive data, segregation of duties, and that really comes into your policy and procedures, multi-factor authentication for your wires and ACH, what we call the principle of least privilege. So when you get to the top of your organization, this is where the highest level of authority should be. And really isolate a computer and avoid public Wi-Fi for banking and payment initiation. Use the phone, call to authenticate all payment requests, and use fraud deterrent services such as Positive Pay and ACH. And this is something, unfortunately, that we have to look at today, is to initiate background checks on all employees and contractors. Inspect your accounts daily and reconcile frequently. And then at the end, review and identify areas of inefficiency and opportunities, including staff training, credit arrangements, compliance, alternative technology, and security. So what the banks are doing, finance departments realize that AP processes need to be modernized. There's an opportunity to realize cost savings and efficiency by reducing manual and paper-based functions. 2019 numbers available show that there's still 46% of middle market companies continue to use checks as their payment vehicle, while 47% cited cost savings as the top benefit of using electronic payments, followed by fraud prevention and better supplier relations. Our focus and the focus of many banks has been to help companies digitize payments in a cost-effective and simple manner. Solutions such as integrated payable products, Paymode X, helps modernize and digitize AP systems without undergoing a costly or lengthy implementation process. So if I'm allowed one commercial today, Chris, I'm proud to say that TD Bank Group has been awarded Most Innovative Digital Bank for the second year in a row by Global Finance, winning 5 Global Digital Bank Awards for 2020, including Most Innovative Digital Bank and Best Information Security and Fraud Management. With all the pain the pandemic has caused, I'm convinced that good will come out of it. We learned after 9/11 what we needed to do to secure our physical plant and technology. We learned from the Great Recession how to shore up the financial services industry. And we learned from the pandemic how to effectively mobilize a remote workforce, change, develop, and implement new technology, and plan for future events. Most importantly, we witnessed the power of business ingenuity and tenacity, which is why I'm also confident that we will come out of this stronger. Thank you, Chris, again for your leadership, and I look forward to meeting everyone in person next year. Thank you.
We're all looking forward to that, Michael. Thank you and TD Bank again for your support, not only of CBIA, but of all manufacturing in Connecticut. So now you're in for a real treat with our first panel. It's moderated by Ari Santiago, President and CEO of IT Direct, who provides organizations cybersecurity, network support, and IT strategy. And IT Direct was named by Markham and Inc. magazine as one of the fastest growing companies in our great country. They've also been recognized as a top place to work as a result of their great leadership and culture. All amazing accomplishments by an amazing company, Ari. And Ari is known as a rock star in the manufacturing community because of his host, the Made in America podcast that he started about a year ago. The podcast features inspirational leaders from our Connecticut manufacturing ecosystem. And Ari has done over 60 podcasts in just over a year. That's a lot of work, people. Highlight stories, best practices, and the amazing impact our manufacturers have on workplace, communities, the state. And legend has it that Ari started the podcast on a bet to prove that there were stories in Connecticut. And man, Ari, have you won that bet? Ari starts every podcast off with the same 2 questions, Ari, right? What do you make?
Why do you make it?
I just told everybody, what do you make? Why don't you tell us why you make it?
Oh, Chris, wow, turning the tables. I was not even prepped for that. Well, I really appreciate that, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you so much for being on the podcast and helping spread the word. We decided to make this podcast in part, as Chris mentioned, because people, I've always felt there's been a dearth of spreading the word of all the great things that are happening in Connecticut, in particular in manufacturing. It's been really terrific on the podcast, doing it for 2 main reasons. One, to share the great positive news that's going on in manufacturing, to help the community at large understand that the new manufacturing is lean, green, clean, it's exciting, it's innovative, it's great careers. It's just a tremendous place to be. And so we've wanted to get the word out about that, and we've been very successful in doing so. And secondly, to provide a platform for manufacturing leaders to share their lessons, to learn and grow. And that dovetails perfectly into our panel today, which I'm really excited to introduce. So we'll get them going alphabetically by first name. So getting started, an alumni of the Made in America podcast, good friend, Brian Montanari. Morning, Brian. Brian's president, CEO of HABCO, an aerospace manufacturer here in Connecticut. Second, a newcomer, but a rising rock star on the Connecticut manufacturing scene, Graham Robinson. Morning, Graham. Graham is Senior VP and Global President of Stanley Industrial with Stanley Black Decker. Got his Stanley Manufacturing background. Nicely done, Graham. Nicely done. Next, another Made in America podcast alumnus, Rina Patel. Good morning, Rina. Rina is VP of Operations Multi-Site for RSCC Wire and Cable. Morning, Rina. And finally, but certainly not least, Rob Noack. Morning, Rob. Rob is the Senior Director of Pharmaceutical Sciences at Pfizer. So very excited to have Rob on the panel this morning. I think I saw Rob on. You with us, Rob? There we go. Excellent, excellent. Morning, Rob. Good morning, panel. Thank you guys so much for jumping on. So our goal in the panel this morning, and we'll get right into it, is to really talk about the state of manufacturing in Connecticut. CBIA released, and I think just linked, the 2020 manufacturing survey. The report comes from data from many, many sources. For my money, most importantly, from a survey of manufacturers that occurred over the middle to late part of the summer. So certainly deep into the pandemic. And just at some high levels, you'll see it in there. Current state of manufacturing, we're looking at just under 4,000 manufacturers here in the state with about 156,000 employees. Solid average wages, actually up from 2019 at $98,000 a year on average, which is just tremendous. And the sector accounts for huge amount of economic activity, over $15 billion in exports and $15.2 billion in defense spending. Probably important to note that last year, 2019, was a record award in Connecticut with $37 billion with a B, dollars of defense contracts awarded to Connecticut. We know those are multi-year. So just some tremendous work. And I think really importantly, and something the manufacturing sector should really be proud of, especially in this time, that deep in the summer, the survey showed that 83% of manufacturers from an employment-based perspective were either growing or holding steady. And I think that's just absolutely tremendous. So let's get right into it. I guess I want to start, I don't want to spend too much time on the kind of COVID pandemic, but let's just get that out of the way. Connecticut has had a very aggressive stance on controlling COVID. Chris alluded to it earlier. We kept manufacturing open, but we did close a lot of sectors. We've reopened in a very controlled way and very monitored. Maybe because of that, Connecticut's in the top half of results when it comes to economic bounce back, doing much better than many of our peer states and states we look at competitors, whether that's New York, New Jersey, the Carolinas, Texas, Florida, even some of the West Coast states. So let me throw it over to the panel, and Brian, I'm going to start with you. What's your take on approaching kind of controlling COVID when it comes to the manufacturing environment? How do you run the balance of keeping people safe, which I think is a business imperative in addition to a health imperative, while being able to meet customer demand?
Yeah, thanks, Ari, and thanks, CBIA, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. Ari, you and I have talked about this topic quite a bit over the past 6 months. And for us at HABCO, when the pandemic started to hit us, we set out with a mantra of three focuses, which is keeping our employees, customers, and suppliers safe, giving our employees the flexibility to take care of the home front, and try to do that without missing customer demand. And those come in conflict all the time. But for us and the executive team, what we talked about from day one is what we want for our families, what we implement for our spouses and for our kids and for our parents. We have to have that same mentality for our employees. We're so thankful to have manufacturing be essential from day one. That was great. But how do we go about making sure all of our employees felt safe? And so for us, our perspective was what we would do for our families, we do for our employees.
And has that been working? You've been able to maintain that level of safety and meet customer demand?
Yeah, we have. Demand is always the challenge. So of course we have our operational challenges every day, but we've been able to maintain a safe workforce. We put all the typical protocols in place early on, and the overwhelming feedback we're getting from our employees is, okay, we're happy to come to work, but how do I know I don't have it if I'm asymptomatic? And how do I know my coworker doesn't have it? So we started doing COVID saliva tests back in early April, and that's been one of the biggest things that we did to help keep everybody safe. And we are finally at a point now where we actually, back on March 10th, we separated the entire workforce. If you don't touch product, you work at home. If you do touch product, we separate into 2 shifts. And I'm happy to say now, here we are, we have everybody back in the facility with the exception of 1 individual. And we had to get creative with special entrances and zones and everything to keep people safe. But I think from the health and safety side, we've done very well, but that conflict is there every day with keeping those protocols in place and meeting customer demand.
Fighting it with safety, information, and testing. Really interesting. Hey, Rob, I'm going to throw a little bit to you. Just want to talk a little bit about what you guys have seen at Pfizer, both from a relationship of managing around COVID and in an environment in an industry that maybe is benefiting in some ways from the research and development on the COVID front. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, and to the degree you want to share anything on the vaccine progress front, certainly feel free. And if you've got a date or something super interesting, don't be afraid to break international news on the CBIA panel.
Well, thanks for that. Yeah, so I would say similar to Brian, we started out the first period of time was very hectic in terms of defining what needed to be done and how do we meet the state requirements. Interaction with the governor's office was great, and kind of getting the essential workforce police set up right away was fantastic. Also fortunate, we've been extremely busy on the site in Groton with a very, very strong portfolio, as well as layering in COVID-19 support programs. And there are folks on the site that support the vaccine piece as well. In terms of the vaccine, I can't really say anything more than what Albert's published, our CEO has published in a letter last week on the 16th, that if all continues to go well in terms of effectiveness and safety, they're hoping to submit the manufacturing data the 3rd week in November for emergency authorization use. And that letter, I think, is posted to the CBIA site as well as the Pfizer site. So it's a really good read. And I think Albert did a great job of summarizing where Pfizer's at, what the approach is around effectiveness, safety, and manufacturing data, and Pfizer's commitment to the pledge of making sure that not only is it effective, but it's safe and follows the full FDA requirements.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And I just want to add one thing, that if for those people that want to have a question asked, we are going to try and go through this panel and do some live Q&A, but feel free to ask questions throughout. There's a Q&A option in your Zoom, so you can kind of click on that and get any questions you want to ask. So I'm going to kind of turn the corner a little bit on this and move to something else. In the survey, the majority of respondents cited proximity to customers, quality of life, and skilled workforce as the major benefits they see from having their businesses in Connecticut. So I'm going to turn to our other 2 panelists, and I'll start with you, Graham. Can you talk about how any of those, or all 3, of proximity to customers, quality of life, or skilled workforce are a leverage advantage for Stanley, and how you view those benefits to benefit the Stanley's business and growing it, which clearly is a business that spans more than just Connecticut?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ari, and thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure and honor to be on the panel to speak about something which is so important to our country, to Connecticut, and to Stanley Black Decker. All 3 that you mentioned are actually extremely critical to Stanley Black Decker. If you think about our presence in the region in Connecticut spanning 175 years, it's one that has gone through thick and thin, crisis, civil wars, pandemics, and has survived through. And survived through primarily due to those 3 things that you mentioned and the ability to leverage them in Connecticut. And I'm a personal testament to it. I'm new to the region. I've been here for 3 months, and I'm new to my role. I've been here for 6 months. And I'm here for primarily that reason, in terms of the opportunity to take advantage of proximity to customers, in terms of the talent we have in the region, and the ability to recruit and use it as a leverage point to drive and grow the business. So I think that we have immense advantages here. and things that we can leverage to drive scale and to drive improvements throughout the manufacturing sector.
That's tremendous. I completely agree. Rina, can you maybe pick up on that same question? Talk about kind of RSCC and from your perspective, how that proximity to customers, quality in life, and skilled workforce are driving value to your business.
First, thank you, Ari, for having me on this panel and for CBIA as well. As Graham said, all of those are important. I would say for RSCC, the availability of skilled workforce and the quality of life are the two major driving forces. And the third one didn't come to mind until I actually reviewed the report, and that has to do with the family and the roots. Graham mentioned Stanley has been around for 175 years. We've been around, RSCC has been around for more than 100 years, 102nd year for RSCC. So when you think about it, I say, even now we have approximately, I would say about half of our workforce that has been with RSCC for more than 15 years. And if I look at 10 years, I mean, it would be like 70%. Not only that, we have had generational family members, as well as the current family members working and friends. I think that the loyalty goes a long way. And, I think it's showing as part of the growth agenda as we move forward for Connecticut.
It's tremendous. Sorry, and I'm going to ask another question. Rob, I'm going to throw it back to you. I think maybe people on this panel don't fully appreciate, or people not on the panel, people on the audience, maybe don't fully appreciate the level of actually manufacturing that Pfizer is doing here in Connecticut. Certainly prior to our conversation, I thought it was more, kind of R&D and sort of chemists. I know there is some of that, but can you talk a little bit about the advanced manufacturing and the automation that we're leaning into in Pfizer? And what that's doing here in Connecticut from an engagement at Pfizer perspective.
Sure. Yeah. Although we're primarily a research site, we do manufacture supplies for clinical studies and have manufactured supplies for commercial material in the past. One big part of enabling that kind of commercial supply is advanced manufacturing implementation. So there's quite a bit of work going on in terms of continuous manufacturing as kind of one focus area, both in the drug product space, so the finished dosage forms that you'll see, tablets, capsules, that the consumer or patient takes, as well as the API and synthesis, moving to flow chemistry and moving out of large batches to very, very small flow reactors, and really, really interesting work, but also work that's all being done in Connecticut, from design of the actual equipment to all the way through the scale up of the manufacturing processes. So it's a really exciting time in terms of all of that, and some great work, and really have felt fortunate to be part of it. But it's also driven a need for skilled workforces, and the folks that we're hiring today are very different than the folks we were hiring 12 years ago, and the upskilling and development and all that goes with it.
Yes, tremendous. And I believe, I mean, could you quote it back for me? Wasn't there some innovation you guys have had of the speed of creating a pressed pill that went from days to hours? I don't want to misquote or feed you too much, but I believe
Sure. Yeah. So that and a lot of this is on YouTube now too. So we did a initiative, started 5 years ago with external collaboration with a few companies. Gaia is a equipment company, and GCON that makes these modular pods, so facilities that can be moved and all over the world. And ultimately, we commercialized our first asset through that process. Sorry, I lost the second part of the question.
Oh, the pills. I just really quickly.
Oh, yeah. So we've moved from, with the process analytics technology that's been tied into the process. You can actually see the quality of each individual dosage form as it's being manufactured, and that's enabled us to go from processes that take a week or more to processes that you'll start seeing powders to final tablets in 10 minutes.
That's a pretty impressive innovation. I think that's the level of automation and innovation that Connecticut needs to lean into, and we've been talking about for a long time, sort of the future of automation, which is certainly in the report. And I think on that, I'm going to kind of go back to Graham. I know, Graham, you've got a passion for advanced manufacturing, for Industry 4.0. Maybe talk a little bit about Stanley's lean into that, where Connecticut is connected to that, and how you see enhanced automation as the future of manufacturing, both in Connecticut and possibly globally.
Thank you very much, Ari. I think if you look at my background virtually, as to where I'm broadcasting from, which is the Manufacturer 4.0. And if you think about where Chris's physical background is, which is the Makerspace CT, both 25,000 square foot facilities, probably 250 feet apart. And if you think about the symbolic element of it in terms of the intersection between public and private partnerships, and the need to leverage both, and the need to utilize Industry 4.0 to drive growth. And both institutions and both places help to seek and to facilitate that. And we at Stanley Black Decker have a very, very strong and rich history in it, and a strong advocacy for it, which is why we formed this manufacturer about 1.5 years ago, which is why it's used to drive innovation for Industry 4.0 within Stanley Black Decker, and then in the future, outside Stanley Black Decker to serve the community. We certainly believe that if you think about the changes that have taken place with the pandemic, one of them is certainly going to be reshoring. There's certainly going to be the need to do more with less, as there always has been with manufacturing. But the need to do it locally, the need to do it in your environment, the need for us to equip our institutions and our manufacturing facilities to drive and operate more efficiently using Industry 4.0. And there's no doubt about that. The only question is, how do we get there, and how do we get there quickly? And we believe that we have a strong role to play in it. And we believe that institutions and the partnerships between CBIA and us and others can help to facilitate that also.
That's great. And I'm going to throw something to you, Brian. Brian, you know, some people are optimists, some people are pessimists, you know, the proverbial glass half full, glass half empty. And from your perspective, being kind of the aerospace person on the panel, talk a little bit about, you know, your perspective kind of on aerospace manufacturing, what you see the path forward, and kind of how you guys are guiding it at HABCO.
Yeah, thanks. You know, there's no doubt that the aerospace industry, especially on the commercial side, has been impacted. I know we update our business plan every year. In January, we're writing our business plan, and there was so much about the commercial aerospace industry that we were focused on, and you know how quickly that changes over the course of 6 months. And you know, it's sad. I have had the opportunity to fly recently, and as you're walking through O'Hare Airport at 7:30 at night, seeing it like a ghost town is, you know, it is sad. The military side has been very strong, but I think from a commercial perspective, you know, everything we're seeing is it will come back, but it's not going to come back quickly. There are a lot of things that have to be in place, but from a business perspective, we have to stay focused on our operations and coming through this stronger than we went into it, because there are a lot of companies who unfortunately aren't making it through this. I see a lot of companies that were so focused 100% commercial, and so there creates opportunities for those businesses that come out stronger. But at the end of the day, the industry is impacted. You know, HABCO's business on the commercial side, you know, it just forces us to partner with our customers a little bit differently, and we each have to have patience with each other.
Yeah, no question about that. Rina, can you talk a little bit about, you know, RSCC does a lot of pretty heavy duty cable, especially in, you know, transportation and infrastructure investment. What is the pandemic doing to RSCC from a business standpoint, and how are you guys looking to chart the path forward?
Wow. Ari, as you heard from Brian and others as well, as for the transportation, you know, things from the aerospace perspective, of course, is down, but we were still doing pretty well for part of the COVID or through the COVID months, because our cables went into other things other than, you know, just the airport transportation, if you will. Of course, we would like to get more of that business back for the cars and other things. But you know what? We are waiting for that infrastructure investment. If Connecticut can go through that and we get more mass transit, I think it would be not only, of course, we are expecting some business through that for our business. What I think is going to hurt us is if we don't get the infrastructure bills passed or federal and state support on an infrastructure level. As long as we get that, I believe that right now we're somewhat stable. Of course, we want to continue to grow, and stable and low. So we want to continue to grow. The resurgency is shedding another level of uncertainty, if you will. So from that perspective, of course, the aerospace industry and others are impacted along with us from transit standpoint.
So I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to go around the entire panel on this kind of workforce and recruiting perspective. And Rob, I'm going to start with you. What are you guys seeing? I mean, we know that prior, looking especially to go back to the 2019 survey, workforce and recruiting, finding qualified talent was everyone's number one challenge. Kind of looking at that growth demand. Certainly, in some ways, that demand outlook has changed. But whether it's the silver tsunami, just replacing, or possibly in some cases, we are growing and need to lean in. Can you talk a little bit about Pfizer's perspective from where you sit in terms of the demand for skilled workers and what you guys are doing to fill that, and if the current environment is either hindering or helping kind of you recruit what you need to recruit? So overall kind of recruiting outlook and state of fulfilling it.
Okay, yeah, so I would say overall we're fairly stable on the site in Groton with about 5,300 folks on the site. We have had some attrition and some new hiring during the pandemic. The need for advanced skill sets, kind of digitally focused, we're constantly evolving in that way on our digital transformation journey as well. So there is a need for different sort of talents and skill sets as we hire due to attrition and backfilling. I would say that during the pandemic, my group has actually hired the most that we've ever hired in kind of a cohort, and we've probably had the best recruiting class we've ever had as well. So we've brought engineers in from all over the U.S. as well as from Yukon. Really excited about the team and the skill sets that we're seeing and how quickly folks have come up to speed and made contributions to the organization. So I think we'll continue down that path, and I actually think that Pfizer's probably benefited from the pandemic in some regards. That we have a very strong portfolio, a lot of work going on, and then a great interest in the work that we're doing, within the state, within the country, and globally, and that's really transpired into very high level recruiting.
People want to be on that team to find that vaccine, right? Rina, talk a little bit about, from your perspective, same question. What are you seeing from the ability to recruit in general? What's the outlook, and has this environment helped, hurt, or not made a difference?
So from a business standpoint, I would say mid COVID times to going forward, what we're doing is literally minimizing the impact, and that may be through not filling any open positions that were there through natural attrition. We've flexed our workforce. Literally, we are continuing our teams to train and cross-train so that we have backups to the backups to the backups. And we're basically getting ready for the business, the growth that we're looking for. So being stable is not sufficient, as you know. Also, we've talked a lot about upskilling the workforce. That becomes absolutely a fundamental need for any business as you think about getting more of manufacturing concepts or Industry 4.0 levels. So of course, we are taking on this opportunity to prepare our business for the growth.
And Graham, we'll turn that to you. What are you seeing? Obviously new on the scene. I know you're building a new team and kind of launching some new stuff at Stanley. What are you seeing from your need to recruit and kind of the impact right now?
Well, we see the need to recruit as being as strong as ever, quite frankly. It's changing. It's changing in terms of the skills that are needed for the people that you're looking to get. And you go from one paradigm to the other. I mean, you have the table stakes of keeping your employees safe and their families safe and getting them to the office. And then to the other extreme of bringing in high-skilled people to drive the latest in technology with artificial intelligence and otherwise that's really needed for the next set of technologies for manufacturing. And the current environment actually does both. It hurts and helps. I mean, it helps in the context that we can be much more flexible compared to where we were before. Before you had to be physically in that site, right beside that site in order to be hired. We can have a bit more flexibility. You could be a couple hundred miles away. You could be in a different part of the state. You could even be outside of the state and then use the state to recruit the person in the state at a later stage. And then it hurts in the context that demand is as great as ever for those top skilled people. I mean, the demand is through the roof. And if you're hiring someone and they don't have another offer, you're probably not hiring the right person. So what you're seeing now is a really a fight for talent, a fight for the top talent. So, on both sides, the game needs to be stepped up.
Are you guys finding any particular techniques or offerings or anything you're leaning into to try and lure them to what you're doing?
Sure. Well, I mean, I try to use myself as an example. I'm here because I believe in certainly Stanley Black Decker. I believe in our vision. I believe in the state, and I physically moved here in the middle of the pandemic for that primary reason. So that certainly helps from a recruiting perspective. But when you have a over 175-year history, commitment to the state, a commitment to manufacturing and the physical presence that you see here, that certainly helps in terms of ensuring that you can bring in the brightest and the best. And we use that throughout, but certainly being much more flexible is important. Not flexibility on talent, but flexibility in some of the other aspects of it. The other thing that we did earlier on is we actually ensured that not just our employees had access to PPE, their families had access to PPE, their families had access to the best care, because that's what people are thinking about when they're working from home. So going above and beyond the call, showing empathy in all aspects of what we do.
That's a really, really great point. And I know something, Brian, that's an approach you guys have taken. So just on the last part of the panel on the same question, Brian, what are you seeing from a need to recruit and challenges and opportunities you're seeing right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo what some of the comments that Graham just had. I know if I look back at my 14 years here at HABCO, when I started, we were a 20-person organization. We grew to about 100 employees, and we onboarded 42 new employees in 2019. So workforce development, that entire process. And Connecticut is a great place, but it's also a challenging place. My biggest customers in state are also my biggest competitors for labor. My suppliers are competitors for labor. My competitors are competitors for labor. So how do we go about that process and do it the right way? I'm tired of trying to steal from other companies. So it's what I see in the state, especially recently, has been fantastic. The Connecticut Workforce Development Unit and Kelly Marie being a part of that is fantastic. There's a lot of things that are moving in the right direction. And so, for us, I agree with Graham, the amount of folks that we're going off trying to recruit that already have other offers, that's fantastic, right? But when we're competing against some much larger companies, that also drives our costs up. And what we need to do from a benefits perspective as a small business to be able to attract employees, we have to sell the benefits of small business. We have to sell the benefits of what we do. And I've seen time and time again, folks that we've hired or grown throughout the organization and train them, and they've got great skill sets, and they get recruited to leave. And so that's a daily challenge we deal with. But I agree right now, especially during the pandemic, even though business is down, it forces that retention and the training to be even more important, and in the development of the healthy workplace organization, because we want to make our employees feel healthy and feel safe here. The moment they don't feel safe, but yet they can look outside somewhere else and try to go and probably get hired somewhere else because of all the skilled labor we have, becomes attractive for them. So balancing all of that in the state is a challenge, but it's also a great state to do it in because of the wealth of skill and talent, and what the state is starting to do now, has been doing for a bit now with incentivizing and helping businesses train and retain.
So I think we can all agree, thanks, Brian. I think we can all agree 2020 has been a year that's given us plenty of lemons. And I don't know about you guys, but growing up, my mom always told me when life gives you lemons, you got to make some lemonade. So I'd like to maybe go down the panel and ask you guys if you could maybe think of one kind of lemonade opportunity, one kind of gem that you've been able to find this year that you're saying, this pandemic, this kind of challenging year on different fronts has brought a lot of problems, but we've identified this one thing, or it brought to light this one opportunity. It brought to light the flexibility of remote workforce. It brought us more together as a family. Whatever that is, I wonder if maybe you guys could each kind of share, one gem that people listening might be able to take away. I'll either volunteer, or if no one wants to volunteer, I'm going to volunteer someone to start. So anybody want to jump in? Rina, go ahead.
So I just wanted to go back. There was a question before where we talked about the employee safety and our workforce safety and so on. I think one of the things that we found was creating that safe space. And safe space didn't mean just keeping them safe with the PPE and other things, but it was physical safety as well as mental safety. There was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of, and we worked a great deal on that. And I'm sure the panelists worked on that as well. I just wanted to make sure that both are considered, because both are as equally important from my perspective. It considers both the lives as well as the livelihood of our team. So now I'll switch on to the gem. So early on during the pandemic, I recognized that our crisis management framework was not adequate to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. And I don't know if anyone can say that theirs was, but yet I worked in collaboration with HR and other team members. We came up with a dynamic and agile framework. So yes, of course, when you think about resurgence and other things, it will and how come it will keep us prepared, I should say, for any resurgency or anything else that may come along. So in parallel, I collaborated with the business team to incorporate our customer and supply chain resiliency to ensure the business continuity. Those two came to mind at first, but as we went through the modifications and all that, the more and more that came to forefront is that the biggest thing we learned was only the change was constant. And that's what we really needed to prepare for. So I'll leave you with this, therefore the change management and the continuous learning are at top of our list in our cultural evolution, or I don't know at this point, maybe I shall say revolution, considering what we're going through.
So really getting the advantage of people being open to leaning in and change, right? Of course, the necessity being the mother of invention, all of a sudden all things seem possible and we can embrace a change. That's a great thing to take advantage of. It's hard to get organizations to get behind change, and getting people behind a change is probably the most important predictor of the success of that change, possibly in some cases even more than the idea itself. So using this pandemic to drive change, that's a great gem, and I think a great opportunity that we can find out here. Who wants to go next?
Well, I'll go next. If you allow me just to mention two, one more personal, one professional. Personal in the context that I started work at Stanley Black Decker on April the 6th of this year. Based in Dallas, Texas, a new division in the middle of the pandemic in automotive end markets. And it was last week that I met my team for the first time face-to-face or in person. And you can imagine running a business, navigating the business in the context where you're all remote and never met anyone before. So at a personal level, it certainly taught me dramatically new skills in terms of engaging with teams, showing empathy, doing it all remote at the same time. And that's certainly things that I will not forget and will help me throughout. On the professional perspective, though, in terms of the business, we really thought it was an opportunity to not let a crisis go to waste, so to speak. So we tried to do the two seemingly conflicting things. One, which is manage the business near term, with the end markets being down 10 to 20%, and at the same time plant seeds for the future. So we planted seeds, and we planted seeds by leveraging some of the things that we did, which is really Industry 4.0, and coming out with offerings to provide our services to other industrial companies that can use it as a platform to help to navigate the crisis, to help to introduce Industry 4.0. So we started and planted seeds for more of a service-based business where we can provide services to other manufacturing companies, similar to what we do internally. And that's probably not something we'd have done without the crisis. It is probably not. And the crisis allowed us to drive and accelerate change. The crisis allowed us to do things that we'd never have done in a completely different way, and to move with speed and urgency. So, there's always a bright side to things, and that's certainly a big bright side that we had from it.
No doubt about it, and especially in larger organizations where moving with speed and efficiency can sometimes be a challenge. So if a pandemic can grease the wheels, as it were, I love that. Don't let a good crisis go to waste. Hey, Brian, you wanna pick up on that, and then Rob, you're up next. Pick up on Brian, maybe on your kind of nugget.
Yeah, sure. And I'll follow Graham and talk about one on personal front and business front, because I think the personal front was kind of a blessing in disguise. We all struggle with work-life balance and balancing all the schedules. So the amount of family dinners we had, the amount of time we got to spend together, especially before one of my daughters moved away this year. And I also found out I was a better TikTok dancer than I thought I would be.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's objectively true, Brian. I don't know if that's
on a professional side, we're an organization, and I'm a manager that likes to be with employees, and the amount of Gemba walks we do, the amount of all hands meetings we do, the amount of cornhole tournaments and cooking, that was, a really difficult time for us to be separate and not be able to be together. So one of the gems that I think we came up with was the development of a YouTube channel that we would put videos out and send out to the entire company to be able to keep everybody informed, not just on a HABCO perspective, but on a state and country perspective. But the other thing that I really enjoyed, HABCO, we had a lot of business that we needed to be focused on in that period of time. So we weren't really able to pivot and help out on a greater scale, whether it's from a PPE perspective or ventilators or anything like that. But I really enjoyed how I saw the state and I saw folks, and especially us here, help other companies out. Friends, Gilman Brothers had an opportunity with the beds they were going to make, and connecting them with Colin in the States to get the state some more beds. That connection, even amongst competitors, was really interesting to watch and see how everybody was helping each other out. And I think the pivot for us, the gem now, I never thought I'd be having so many conversations associated to saliva samples and biohazard bags in an aerospace company, but we helped a lot of companies stand up a testing program so they can test their employees. And through that, we're getting a lot of pull to be able to actually provide that as a service. So we've been approved to actually help companies and do the testing for them, because I think, especially as we come here into this cold and flu season, testing is going to become even more critical than it has in the past. So the pivots, as much as we'd love to help out in other industries, I think just helping each other out was probably one of the biggest gems I saw, seeing the state come together. The traffic that went on the CBIA's website and CONNSTEP's website over the last 6 months was record breaking, and to see the state come together was really nice.
Yeah, definitely stronger together. I'm going to touch on that actually in a second. So Rob, let's throw it to you. What gems do you have? What taking advantage of a crisis have you seen?
Yeah, probably. So on a personal level, it's real blessing. If I have an oldest son who's a junior in college that we thought was kind of off in the wind after he graduates, but so he came home, spent 6 months with us. We had family dinners for the first time in 3 or 4 years together. It was really a great time. We kind of spent 6 months as a family. And then personally, on a work front, that I'm about 50% on site. The group I run is essential, but we've been able to kind of really ring fence key people that need to be there. So I still have the benefit of being energized by getting to interact with folks a couple times a week, and then go off and do a bunch of work when I'm not there. And that's, so I've still had that kind of personal interaction and energy, which I'm really thankful for. As a site, we're probably still 80% remote. So I think the real blessing for us has been the change management curve, as Rina and Graham Brian all alluded to, is that I would say we redeveloped some processes to be fully digital in a week's time that we kind of had chartered to for the next 6 months to 12-month kind of programs, and really setting up based on safety, based on what we need to get done, what the work that's in front of us, how do we keep folks remote that can operate remote, and how do we support the people that absolutely need to be there. So digitalization in terms of remote support areas, simple digital investments to allow for paper processes and digital signatures and those sort of things to go through, and then more investment in kind of our digital transformation processes, kind of emphasized through the process. And ultimately, again, still stage 3 and have the majority of the folks on site remote. And we do have some labs working double shifts, have done different things to make sure that we're productive. But the productivity, across groups has been maintained, if not increased in many areas.
That's great. So we got some questions coming in, so keep them coming. I've worked some in, and we'll work the rest in as we go forward. I do like to keep us kind of on a positive track, but I want to acknowledge that one of the feedbacks we got out of this survey was government regulation and kind of not moving, maybe some of those challenges to manufacturing businesses here in Connecticut. Some cited federal, many cited state. I just wonder if anyone wants to tackle really quickly, your view on sort of the regulatory or the government kind of environment, and what you're doing either to mitigate or not noticing it, or kind of what you're doing about it. So I'll let anybody who wants to jump in on that. If you don't jump, I'm picking. All right, Brian, that's you.
Yeah, I figured as much, Ari. Thanks. So look, I think I saw something come out this morning in one of the articles that Connecticut is 47th in the country for business tax climate, or something similar. So I think there are a lot of challenges that businesses in the state are against. It's a great state to work in, but it's a big challenge, and so we have to continue to find ways to operate within those regulations. You look at CMMC and all these other things that are here that we have to continue to invest in order to stay competitive, but also to be able to stay in business for those customers. So when we look at the private-public partnerships and the opportunities, I think that's an area where I think the more, like the Connecticut Manufacturing Collaborative, all the different organizations coming together to help the businesses navigate through that. Education is one thing, but implementation is a completely other thing.
Go ahead, Rina. How do you think about kind of regulatory environment, and how do you work through that? I think you might be on mute, so just check that real quick.
Yeah, thank you. You know what, Ari, when you look at regulations and fiscal uncertainty, for us, our biggest challenge is fiscal uncertainty, because it causes a lot of pressure, and having for us to strike the right balance between the investments for the current, running the current business needs versus looking out for future opportunities. So from that perspective, it does cause, it has been a biggest challenge. I would echo Brian's sentiment around overall business taxation, and also literally extremely lenient labor laws are hindrance to our competitiveness. If you think about workman's comp and other specific regulations that are, really hurting our competitiveness.
Yeah, so we got to work together, I think, to do that. And let me kind of pivot a little bit here, which is CBIA is leaning very heavily into collaboration and partnerships. We've been seeing that for a while, whether it's the alliance with CONNSTEP, the launch of the CMC, just to name a few. And I think under, even more now, talking about partnerships and collaboration in business. And so, Graham, I'm going to start with you, and I wonder if maybe you could talk about what you see as the business value and value businesses get by banding together to drive better results for the group and individually.
I think it's just critical. I mean, there's actually probably it's just become so much difficult without. I mean, if you listen to what the both Rina and Brian said in terms of regulation, high taxation, you could add to that the educational environment in which, for us to succeed, we not just have to do it fast. So in terms of simplifying regulation and speed of approvals, but we have to do it right. And in order to do it right, we have to get the right set of talent in the organizations at the right time. And talent is in general a function of the infrastructure that provides it. And the educational system is key for that. And the extent to which we can partner and we can collaborate between us to help to facilitate that. And we at Stanley have a strong and rich history in that, and we'll continue to do that. But we need to ensure that we get the graduates who have the right skills for the future. I mean, not the skills of today, the skills of the future. And institutions like this, institutions and otherwise, that help to facilitate that. And the extent to which we partner to do that is absolutely critical for our success going forward.
I agree with that. And Rob, I'm going to maybe pivot off of that a little bit and just ask you, if we gave you the magic wand, what would you like to see in terms of that specific education change? I'm a big believer in that. For whatever reason, education seems to be stuck in the mid 20th century, maybe in terms of what we teach to some degree and how we teach it. I'm supposed to moderate, not share views probably on this panel, but there we go. Point of privilege there. So maybe Rob, talk a little bit about, we just made you, king of the world for education. What do you think we should be thinking about in terms of how and what we should be educating the workforce of the future to get people who can participate, not just in the R&D at Pfizer, but also in the advanced manufacturing you guys are doing? You touched on some amazing stuff down there. What are you looking for? What do you think we need?
Yeah, and I think I would, I guess one of the things, so we're a global company. We do a lot of work. We have a sister site in England, and always really been amazed at, England's approach as a small country to the apprenticeship programs and technical programs, both from how they put people in technical career tracks into the workforce in their high school years, as well as these college apprenticeships, technical apprenticeships, even technical PhD programs, which we don't really have in the US, where they're very applied PhD as opposed to theoretical. And I think it's brought a tremendous value to Pfizer over the years. So, they're constantly running 10 to 20 of these types of things or more at the sites, and it's win-win for the public-private partnership. And it's just been, it's something that as we've looked at over the years, a strong desire to do more with, and kind of how do we connect up at a state level to do that. But that kind of encompasses a lot of those different things, right? So how do we incorporate more technology and structure, and then the interaction with actually the businesses are changing so rapidly. How do you give people exposure to that, and not have it kind of just be the kind of dynamics that are typical in an education program?
Listen, I'm so on board with that, that applied learning. And I think, there's a lot of talk about public-private partnerships. And I think you hit on something that's really an imperative, which is not try and figure out how the educational institutions can learn everything that they need to learn to teach everyone as things change so quickly, but use that private partnership, use the education to teach how to think and how to approach things. And then the private side to get in there and get that applied learning. I think that's super powerful. If we could lean into that in Connecticut, continue to raise the stakes on our ability to drive workforce forward. I'm going to turn to Brian and Rina on a kind of an offshoot of that workforce development, which is thinking about how you're looking at workforce recruitment, upskilling, and apprenticeships. How has your approach to any of those items, workforce development, upskilling, and apprenticeships, changed during COVID? Rina, let me start with you, and then Brian, I'll come to you right behind that. How has it changed in this pandemic, leaning into that workforce development and apprenticeships specifically?
Ari, you know what they say, necessity is mother of invention. So needless to say, it became extremely agile but dynamic. We literally trained our team members from each other. From an apprenticeship perspective, we have some of the team members who already were there. So basically, there was a mentorship program of sort that we created, and they worked alongside with them. So that's how we are tackling at the moment. We have such specific needs also that even if they come learned, we would have to still train them in-house. So again, we took the opportunity, took our onboarding program to the next level, if you will. Onboarding is in for even if you're looking at any other position or training. And we searched, we are also on LinkedIn Learning. We facilitated with several of our Marmon sites, if you will. So there were several different things we did other than just at this specific location.
Collaborate, lean into technology, absolutely terrific. And I think you referenced kind of you're part of a larger group, so you have that. When I think CBIA and other organizations, whether it's CMC or ACM or EMA or Manufacturing CT, for smaller organizations can lean into those groups to kind of get some peer learning across sites. So Brian, what about you? What are you seeing different in terms of workforce development and apprenticeships in this environment?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when you look at social distancing and all of the protocols that we have to put in place when you're trying to train employees, or we have apprentices internal, and you want, typically you've got everybody side by side working hand in hand, and trying to do that with proper social distancing was a huge challenge. And we had engineers working from home who would typically be on the shop floor with folks. That gap was really difficult. There's only so much you could do on your cell phone with the Zoom and everything else to try to train. So we've I'm not saying we've done this great yet, but we're trying to look at what other things could we do. We're actually looking at implementing some augmented reality technology, so you can have that hands-free, be working, but see on the glasses, see on the tablet what knob you should be turning, or where you should be laying that bead, or what you should be doing. And I think that's a piece that I think will be with us for a while and be, similar to what Rina talked about. I don't think we would have been looking at some of this technology if it wasn't for the pandemic. And I think we'll be a much better company for it. It's going to allow us to send, maybe some technicians or engineers who are not as experienced as others out on the road to go service our product, but have technology where somebody who has the experience could be helping them through it. So I think that's an area for us that I'm excited about jumping into.
I appreciate that. And for folks out there, keep the questions coming. I have been working them in. So if you've got more, keep them on there. I'm really big believer, Brian, as you probably can imagine, owning a technology company, but big believer in technology, especially IT. The rapid pace of innovation and adoption really, I think, has been impressive during the pandemic. And I do believe it will be here to stay. And I think the companies that lean in, like you guys have all been talking about, are the ones that are going to be the winners. I think it's not just that, it's also, and people have mentioned, LinkedIn Learning. I think we're hearing, and this has been on the podcast, is people are leaning into understanding that in the 21st century, marketing and sales has got to be different too. And now, before, where people kind of were leaning on the old method of kind of knocking on doors and showing up with a kit of your product, and now learning how to make. I mean, we've heard YouTube from a number of different. I think everyone has mentioned YouTube in one way or another, but leaning into that and kind of driving that forward, I think, is something we're seeing, and the companies that are doing that are really going to be thriving into the future. And I think that kind of dovetails to another interesting question, which is, and Graham, I'm going to throw this to you. What do you see as the role government might have and the partnership might have in the intersection between people and technology, and how that plays into what we're doing right now with the pandemic and going forward?
Well, I think the role is critical. I think it's central to driving and accelerating everything that we're speaking about. It's central in terms of putting in place processes that allow for faster approvals. We saw that take place historically through the COVID crisis, where There was a faster approval for many of the different technologies or PPE or manufacturing. We need that to extend. We need it to continue. We need it to continue so that we can facilitate innovation throughout. And we spoke about education. I mean, that is absolutely central in terms of the role of government. We don't get to do one or the other. We don't get to just do this in the crisis and forget about it. We don't get to just do one in terms of the faster approvals and not do education. We have to do both because both are absolutely central for our success. So I view the role of government as one that helps to enable businesses, helps to accelerate progress. And while their role is central, we do it with a partnership. We do it in cases where we can put together public-private partnerships. But the role of government needs to be very, very strong in helping and enabling companies like ours and smaller companies to take advantage of the changes that have taken place in the marketplace due to the pandemic.
So we only have a few more minutes left. There's a question that was about what manufacturers are looking at from legislation passed to help reduce obstacles in business. And I'm going to answer that question in kind of a different way, which is, and Chris had mentioned it, the CBIA pledge. And I think CBIA has really taken a new approach this year to really focus in on a small number of actionable items that could really make a difference. And they're really across 5 areas, right? It's workforce development, urban renewal, infrastructure investment, small business relief, and taxpayer return on investment. I think everyone on this group could probably agree, those 5 areas, if we can make progress in those areas, boy, that's going to make a big impact. And if people haven't looked at the pledge, definitely, as Chris did, encourage you to get on there to sign up for it. We've talked a lot about here, we're going to be stronger together. The businesses have to band together. We have to talk with one voice. The CMC really shows the power of that one voice and what it can do to make positive change. We're starting to see some things. Colin's doing a great job. We see investment in workforce, the Transfer Act change. Probably a lot of us think it was a little bit too late, but better late than never is what I always say, and it's here now. So let's enjoy the win and keep moving forward. So I want to go back to the panel, and in the next, hopefully we can do this in 3 minutes. Can you talk about those 5 areas: workforce development, urban renewal, infrastructure investment, small business relief, and taxpayer ROI, and maybe pick one and talk about which one's kind of nearest and dearest to your heart that you think would really make a positive difference in the environment here in Connecticut. We're going to go, I'll call it backwards down the number line. So Rob, you're up first.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about workforce development, and I think that's probably the biggest one for us. I think the in terms of what we're focused on at Pfizer, equity is also a big issue, something we want to tackle. And to me, that kind of fits in with item 2 in terms of urban renewal and how do we do a very inclusive, diverse workforce and provide equity in many different ways. And they're intertwined, quite frankly. But it's so how do we continue to grow a workforce? How do we do the right thing for the communities that we live in, for public health and develop in the locations that we're at.
I totally agree with that, Rob. And I'll even dump one on top of that, which is, part of the challenges with the urban renewal and the equity for folks that live there is when manufacturing moved out of downtown and into urban industrial, suburban industrial parks, the ability to get people from the urban centers out is a challenge. And so infrastructure investment and transportation can get there. And we certainly shouldn't confuse education with intelligence. We got to invest in those inner cities and make sure that we're taking advantage of the talent there, because workforce development's key. Rina, what do you got? We got those 5 items. What do you see as the most important?
Definitely infrastructure investment. I spoke about it a little bit before. Any investment in mass transit, we're expecting, of course, that would entail some business for us. So even if travel is less and airports are not using the cars, if there are other sorts of transportation that we can bank on, that would be terrific. Secondly, I believe that it would help revitalize the economy and would lessen the tax burden. I'm not going to go over workforce development because I knew that that's just a key need for all of us.
No, I like that infrastructure investment being critical. We got to be able to move goods and people from place to place. And infrastructure is not just roads, trains, it's also internet infrastructure and broadband and 5G. Graham, what about you? What do you think from the 5 priority pledges from CBIA? What do you see as driving value?
I'll cheat. I'll say 2, and probably similar to Rob. So workforce development, I spoke about that before. No need to go through it again. But the second one on urban renewal is really central. I mean, it's central to not just how we think about Stanley Black Decker, but if you think about our major cities, if you think about Hartford and otherwise, if you look at where I am physically or virtually, and where Chris is physically, that is absolutely central in terms of driving and putting in place the people that are needed for the future. So I think Rob said it well. The 2 are intertwined. We have to drive urban renewal, and we need to use that to accelerate our workforce development.
Oh, love it. Brian, what about you? What are you going to pick for us?
Yeah, well, actually, the reality for me is that they all go hand in hand, similar to what Graham and Rob were just talking about. So for me at HABCO, obviously, workforce development I've talked about, but the relationship that has with the small business relief and taxpayer ROI, they go hand in hand. And so that for me, I love this pledge. I love how it all works together. We've got facilities in different areas. So I don't think you can do one without the other, obviously. And for me, workforce development with those other 2 are the key ones for HABCO.
Listen, it has been an absolutely tremendous panel. I want to thank you guys so very much. Chris, thank you for the opportunity to get on here and drive this. While it was nice to not have to drive anywhere and just roll out into the office, I think next time let's try and get this thing live and safe, and maybe do it in the afternoon so we can have a drink when it's all said and done.
That sounds great, Ari, man. You never disappoint. And that was a fantastic panel. We were talking here with the crack staff that we could have listened to you guys all day long. So that could be an 8-hour Made in America podcast, a future one. So thank you all, and stay well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to segue to our next panel, which is our crack staff team at CBIA, CONNSTEP, and RSCC, and they're going to talk about how they're working with Connecticut manufacturers to navigate the challenges identified in the survey and by the prior panel. So Eric Brown, our Vice President of Manufacturing Policy and Outreach, is going to join us right now, and Shannon Merriman, our Executive Director of RSCC, who's working with our education system to create career-connected learning. And last but certainly not least, Bonnie Del Conte, President of CONNSTEP. And as I mentioned at the opening, Bonnie, I just want to take this moment to personally congratulate you for your amazing career and your upcoming retirement. And Bonnie, I got to thank you too. We started working together 14 years ago, you and I and the CONNSTEP team in my prior life. And without your support and the amazing team at CONNSTEP that you built, I know I wouldn't have been as successful, and Pegasus wouldn't have been successful. And I'm sure there's many other manufacturers that feel that way. So hats off to you. Congratulations on the upcoming retirement. I'm really happy we have you for a couple more months though. So take a bow, and why don't you kick us off?
Thanks, Chris. Really great comments, so I appreciate that very much. What we wanted to talk a little bit about, and will dovetail nicely with just what the panel was talking about previously. We looked at the survey and said, we do this every year, and we know that there's going to be opportunities and certainly some challenges that come out of the results. And I'm going to say that we already know they're going to be around workforce, they're going to be around process and people and talent, Industry 4.0, and there's going to be stuff on policy. And I think that was clear of what the panel just said. So we want to just dovetail from our 3 organizations of how we're going to help improve where we can under a continuous improvement opportunity that came out of the positive results of the survey, and where we could help out and where the things are not working as good as everybody would say. What I'd like to say from the CONNSTEP side of things is I thought the numbers were quite high, with people saying who was going to, which companies were going to in the near future and currently going into some new markets and some new products and development. I thought that was pretty positive, following a national trend that I just recently read about from our NIST MEP organization. So I think that really focuses on probably the lemonade out of the lemons of the pandemic too, of saying that those that were in just one or two markets or sectors, trying to branch out and do something a little bit differently. So that sort of came out of that. And I want to say that Industry 4.0 will be around that and how to do it. You know, we're all responding to, you know, agility to a really volatile market out there, competition on costs, and need for speed remain all the time. So going into a new market is even adding another challenge to, you know, focus on demand of today and then opportunity of something in the future. So I think what's important to our Connecticut manufacturers is how to go about it. You know, we all know what the Internet of Things are, what cobots can do, but practical application is really, really hard sometimes to get your brain around. So I think assessments, knowing the costs, knowing what you're going to have for resources to do that is very, very important. So there's pathways to do that, just like anything else, hiring a workforce, onboarding, there's pathways how to take a new product to market or how to improve by doing it in a very thoughtful way. So I think that we're trying that anyway, that approach to the market to say, we're here for you. We'll be able to walk you through those steps, and then hopefully that aha moment, that light goes off and you see how it's applicable in your business. And I think that that's where we're going to move to, and that dovetails very nicely with the workforce and talent acquisition that has to be made. If we're going to hire, you've heard from the last panel, different types of skill sets. We're in a digital world right now. Those kind of things that you have for your new employees in new equipment, new technologies, new product development are really exciting. And that adds to building that workforce. I also think that building that workforce needs to have a clear pathway as any continuous improvement activity and a process. And looking at, you know, not changing the system. You can't boil the ocean and look at education and say it's going to turn tomorrow, but can we realize and start moving to a place where there's real look at from K through 12 of what's going to happen and what those skill sets are going to be needed in the future, and how we prepare for those pathways and curriculum. So on that, I'm going to pass it over to Shannon Merriman from RSCC, who I think can talk about some of the endeavors that we're looking at and processes we're trying to help with there, and help Kelly and Colin and everybody else that is invested now in our state to lead those endeavors. Shannon?
Thank you, Bonnie. My name is Shannon Marimone. I'm the Executive Director of RSCC. We are a statewide nonprofit that sits at the intersection of education and workforce development, and we're an affiliate of CBIA and work very closely with CONNSTEP. And I think that the configuration of those three organizations working together has a lot of power and opportunity to coordinate across a lot of the topics that have come up even just in the first part of this conference. The role of RSCC has been focused on closing opportunity gaps for the most underserved students in Connecticut, while also ensuring access to career-connected opportunities and success in those opportunities. And we do four things to live up to that mission. We do direct programming with schools and districts to build their capacity with career-connected learning. We do policy that enables good practice that shows results for students and is also meeting the needs of employers. We work on public awareness, so bringing attention to key issues in education that need to be addressed. There's a lot happening right now in education, and we want to make sure that attention is being paid to that. And fourth, but not least, is partnership and thinking about the partners we have with CBIA and CONNSTEP, but also the broader community of partners. We can't do this alone. And as many have already mentioned on the previous panel, the educational system is a large intractable system at times, and so we need to work together to think about where we can have impact and change. Our programming efforts have focused on career pathway work, and we're supporting schools and districts to make connections with business and industry and break down those silos. We work directly in some school districts across the state, and we're hoping to work with more and bring learnings, lessons learned about how to form those partnerships effectively. We also work quite a bit with computer science, especially because we know that that is a skill that is going to be infused in every different industry area that is out there. And we as a state need to invest more in our K-12 system in particular to build the pipeline of students who have that skill set and then continue on into post-secondary education to pursue computer science. And I think just speaking to the report, the comment that Kelly Valerie's made as the new head of the workforce development unit, that career exposure and opportunity begins in kindergarten, we wholeheartedly believe that, and we want to make sure that we're better aligning our educational system with our workforce needs. I'm going to end on just talking about a particular project that we are working on with CONNSTEP and CBIA. It's the Manufacturing Skills for Connecticut initiative, and we have a very quick slide that I think is going to be put up that outlines the structure, the organizational structure. Is that, I don't know, I might not be seeing it. Oh, there it is, it's coming. There we go. So this is just a structure for a project that we're working on. It's a 2-year grant that CONNSTEP has received as our state MEP. And the goal of the grant is to better understand the career pathway opportunities in our state, as well as in neighboring states, specifically Rhode Island, that lead to advanced manufacturing careers. And so the partners in this effort include ReadyCT, who will be working on the project deliverables very closely with CONNSTEP as the grantee and the overall head of operations. We'll also be working really closely with CBIA as the manufacturing and public policy liaison, who will in turn be working with the Connecticut Manufacturers Collaborative to bring in the employer voice in the process every step of the way. The result of this project will be that our first phase is to inventory existing programs in our state and neighboring states. 2 is to evaluate the efficacy of those programs. Are they doing what they are intended to do? You know, so a lot of programs sound really great on paper or flashy in a press release, but are they actually having the impact we want to see with students and meeting the needs of employers? And then lastly, we will be building a repository of the programs we identify, as well as the best practices that emerge as a result of the evaluation process. So we're really excited. We hear a lot of desire for some sort of centralized resource around industry needs and the workforce development opportunities in our state, and we hope we will be responding to that through this project. So just wanted to give a quick update on that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eric to talk a bit about his work with the CMC, which completely relates to that project.
Thanks, Shannon. Thanks for everybody for being with us today. First of all, just really 2 things I want to focus on. Number 1 is working on year 27 at CBIA. I can't tell you how excited I am that Bonnie and her team at CONNSTEP and Shannon and her team at ReadyCT are now part of our organization. If you go to the staff meetings of these organizations and board meetings, these real innovators, and I'm just so excited because with them on board and with Chris's leadership, I think when people hear the word or the acronym CBIA, they're going to think about something very differently a year or 2 from now than they perhaps have in the past. So, just so appreciative. 2 aspects of that I think separate these organizations. Take technology, for example. God knows how many organizations and entities are out there working hard to help businesses on technology and incorporating technology into their organizations. But CONNSTEP is the one organization that's actually in the companies themselves, in the manufacturers themselves. They're uniquely positioned to take holistic, comprehensive, step-by-step analysis of companies. They don't just try and shove one piece of the pie into the puzzle. So really tremendous asset there. And similarly, as Shannon mentioned, they are in the schools themselves. They are in urban centers and urban school systems, hands-on. So just really unique qualities and just so excited about the future working with you guys. On what the more traditional view sometimes of CBIA in terms of our public policy advocacy as it pertains to the survey that came out today. You know, on page 17, there's a little chart about what folks have identified as their top legislative priorities. I'd say two things. Number one, you got an election in 2 weeks, and please don't discount your opportunity to have an impact there. Put the survey, it's electronic, send your employees the survey so they can look at it, or get a hard copy or two and put it out in the lobby. Explain to them why, however you answered that question, whether it's, you know, pension reform or economic growth, job growth, whatever your priorities, talk to them about it. Explain why it's important to you and your company so they can be educated on that. You're not telling them how to vote. You're just educating them on what these external pressures are in your business and where it comes from. And they have an opportunity to impact that in a couple of weeks. So, you know, I know we're running late on time, and I'll just leave it there. I know we have an opportunity for Q&A, but thank you all again.
Yeah, thank you, Eric and Bonnie and Shannon. We do have a question here. I'll take a swing at it. You guys can certainly jump in, but it's what are we doing to incentivize businesses to remain in Connecticut? And I know, having been on the other side, right, for the last 18 years, having been in the manufacturing community, you learn by going to a lot of different meetings that there's so many tools in the toolbox that people are unaware of. And I think that is one of the incentives, because when you look at the Connecticut toolbox, and I know Commissioner Lehman and the panel after the break will certainly talk about some of the state initiatives, but there's even, as you just mentioned, Shannon, the grant out there. When you look at the full toolbox, the number of tools in there to grow during good times and the weather downturns, as I mentioned, Bonnie and the CONNSTEP staff helped me in my prior life. When you look at that full toolbox, it is second to none. There aren't other states or other areas of the world that have a toolbox that full. And Bonnie, you are the one who delivers that toolbox to a lot of manufacturers. You go in, as Eric said, and say, hey, are you aware of this? Oh, are you aware of that? So do you want to just comment on that a little bit?
Sure, Chris, and you're right. We're really a generous state. I'm going to say that to our manufacturing community. You know, the MIF fund has been really a good tool, a revenue tool for many people. The support that CONNSTEP gets from DECD, along with our federal program, lets us be able to do that in our state and leverage opportunities in that area. I can tell you that as an MEP center, the Connecticut Center, when I go to our national meetings, I belong to their leadership team. When I talk to other states and a variety, and I'm always someplace, either the Midwest or the other side of the coast, and by far, our state does a lot to do financially and with tools and resources in our state to offer manufacturing, far more than I hear anywhere else. So.
All right, well, we are up against it. I'm going to jump in the airplane behind me, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. We're going to come back at 10:35, right? Yep, 10:35. That's what the chat says. So, Bonnie, congratulations again. Eric and Shannon, thanks for joining us. And we will be coming back from the break with Commissioner Lehman and his staff. Thank you, everyone. Really progressing the organization forward here, moving from jazz music to Bruce Springsteen during the break. I'm really proud about that. So are we ready to move on to our next moderator? We're going to play the video. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and roll a video here. Hopefully.
Connecticut Manufacturing, a powerful force. There are over 4,400 manufacturing companies in Connecticut. They employ more than 160,000 people and create hundreds of thousands of additional jobs. Connecticut's manufacturing workers are educated, skilled, highly paid, and among the most productive in the world. Manufacturing companies pay over $300 million in state taxes annually and add $25 billion to the state's economic output while generating billions of dollars in additional activity. Keep manufacturing strong. A message from CBIA.
Great video. We're back, and I want to welcome our next moderator, David Lehman, the Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development. And David's no stranger to the manufacturing community. As I said in the opening remarks, him and Governor Lamont and the entire team there deserve a tremendous amount of credit for deeming all manufacturing essential at the start of our COVID pandemic. In fact, in some segments, manufacturers are actually seeing an increase in business and are hiring, which would have never been possible if they weren't deemed essential. So David, I want to thank you for your continued public and private partnership with DECD and CBIA, CONNSTEP, and ReadyCT. It proved its strength during the reopening phases and proved it again as we worked together to draft legislation to eliminate kind of the clunky Transfer Act, I'll say, which has affected so many Connecticut manufacturers. I look forward to continuing the collaboration with you and Commissioner Westby, who we'll hear from, and of course, Colin and Kelly, great additions to the team, as we develop and execute strategies and policies to rebuild our great state. And David, as we went into the break, one of the questions was about the initiatives that we're doing to incentivize our businesses to stay in Connecticut. And I got to tell you, I'm really happy about the launch of the, I think it's the biz.ct.gov site. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'll just give you credit again and give the state credit. The toolbox that we have is incredible, and just people need to learn about all the different tools in the toolbox. And I know you're going to educate us right now. So I'll turn it over to you, and thank you again.
Great. Chris, thank you very much. And really, really great to be here virtually. I remember vividly being in Trumbull with this group last year, 12 months ago, which feels like, I think, 5 years ago for me and others. I just want to make a couple quick comments, but why don't we please bring up the members of the panel, Commissioner Westby, Colin Cooper, as well as Kelly Marie Valeries. But well, first off, it's going to be really challenging here to follow up with Bruce Springsteen. So we'll try to do our best for a bunch of state employees to keep this interesting. But I think we've got a really solid team here, and I think Colin's been here for a year. Kelly's been here for a month or two, and Kurt has more experience than all of us, I think, combined. So you'll hear a bunch of different perspectives, public sector, as well as folks that recently joined from the private sector. But Chris, I do want to take the opportunity here to address that question, because I think it is important. And I'm hopeful that this group and others in the business community have seen some of the decision-making from Governor Lamont, not just in the COVID crisis, where I think whether it's our lockdown, our reopening, currently where we are with respect to the virus in our economy, Connecticut has done quite well, especially when you look at the macro data, but we realize we need to do this beyond COVID. And I think a couple of the key tenets from Governor Lamont and the administration are, one, we need to provide tax certainty and certainty in terms of costs here. And in Connecticut, just if you look backwards, we as a state government have not done that. And Governor Lamont is incredibly focused on providing that certainty, because we know to get investments in the state of Connecticut, whether it's plants, equipment, or people, there needs to be certainty as it relates to those costs. So that's something we're very focused on, and you'll see more from us on that. Secondly, you referenced, what I call kind of simplification, or the customer-centric nature of dealing with government. Two recent examples, and I think they were mentioned here. One, the Transfer Act. The Transfer Act should have been repealed a long time ago. I see Senator Hartley is on this call. She gets really much, if not all, of the credit for leading that charge. But doing away with the Transfer Act and moving to what's going to be a much simpler and more certain system, that is really key, and that's what we're going to need for investment in both companies and real estate. And then the business one-stop, business.ct.gov, for those that haven't seen it, that'll give you a flavor for the interaction, again, away from what we're going to talk about here on workforce and other initiatives around manufacturing, but how the state wants to work with its small businesses in particular and make it a much easier and simpler experience. So with that, I'm happy to take any more questions on that, but I want to get into the panel here. And the panelists have agreed if they start talking over each other, we're going to mute them, much like the presidential debate. But this group is probably not too contentious. So I'll just read the names off left to right on my screen, if you guys don't mind introducing yourselves, experience as well as tenure in government, and what you've been spending your time on. Colin, please start.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, David. Thanks for having me. I'm Colin Cooper. I'm the state's Chief Manufacturing Officer. I have well over 20 years running a manufacturing business in Connecticut before I joined the state. I started my career as a design engineer for Pratt & Whitney a lifetime ago. And I started with the state. I'm coming up on my 1-year anniversary next week. And I've learned that it's sort of like dog years. It feels like it's been about 7 years. So, but it's been very exciting, and I'm delighted to be here. Thanks.
Great. Kelly?
Good morning, everybody. Kelly Valeries. I am the new Executive Director of the Workforce Development Unit at DECD. I'm 3 months, excuse me, into my tenure. I previously have been an industry partner to Connecticut for many years, owning 2 manufacturing companies for the last 14 years. And prior to that, I have a PhD in adult experiential learning. So all of the workforce and initiatives that we're doing is really around the heart of my kind of core competencies and my passion that I have for working with our workforce development unit.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And Kurt?
I am Kurt Westbeek, Commissioner Labor. I may have been around a little longer in state government than some of my counterparts here, but I'll tell you, everyone else on this panel has a lot more experience than I do. And I cannot think of a better panel and a better leadership in terms of leading manufacturing than Chris DiPentima, Colin Cooper, Kelly Valoris, and Bonnie Del Conte, as well as David Lehman. I mean, I think we really have the A team here. So I'm really excited. I've been around since 2016, and I'm always been a huge proponent of manufacturing.
Great, thanks, Kurt. And listen, this is a good sample of Governor Lamont's philosophy here. We want to have outside experts that are part of state government that know manufacturing. Obviously, Kelly and Colin fit that bill. I did not, which is why we needed to hire Kelly and Colin right away. And Kurt, your experience in labor in government, we think that is the right special sauce in terms of efficacy and making sure we have a real impact. So why don't we get into the questions here? First off, and I don't want to call it a lightning round, but this is for all of you guys. How is the state's focus on manufacturing? How's that changing? And Kelly and Colin, maybe for you, you saw it from the private sector. What are you seeing now? What are the conversations like now versus what you saw previously? And Kurt, you've seen it for a while, as you said, from the state side. How is what we're seeing now, and we'll define now as post-COVID for that matter, or the tail end of COVID, we hope. Let's do a little compare and contrast on what's different and what will be different. Colin, you want to start us off?
Sure. Well, I certainly think that there's a heightened sense of awareness of the importance of manufacturing in the state, and that awareness, in government, there's an awareness of that. Understanding that manufacturing is high wages, it provides young people with careers, not just jobs. There's a high multiplier in terms of economic output and impact on other sectors. And that it creates opportunities for our citizens who have sort of non-traditional educational backgrounds. So I think that's one of the things that has been changing, certainly as over the last couple of years, certainly before I got here, but that's accelerating. As far as the pandemic goes, I think what it's really done is it's really accelerated the cooperation, the collaboration, and now, particularly in some of the things that Kelly's doing, the coordination amongst different stakeholders in the state to move, to advance the cause of manufacturing in the state. So I think I'm very encouraged on sort of the way things are moving in terms of awareness and action in the state.
Great, thanks, Colin. Kelly?
When I started working on workforce development issues out of necessity for my own company,
turning the sign
there was not much going on around the state. And I was lucky to find EMA, the Eastern Advanced Manufacturing Alliance, kind of coming together around workforce development issues in Eastern Connecticut. And so I joined that group and we collaboratively put together programs that met the needs in our region, but we were very regionalized and very siloed across the state. So there was many other manufacturing associations, but we were kind of all doing our own thing and not really sharing best practices or coordinating and talking to each other. And so I think over the years, we all realized how important it was for us to start having those conversations and collaborating our efforts. And so the CMC was kind of born out of our collective want to organize and collaborate together. And we were fortunate enough to have CBIA come together as our intermediary and bring in CONNSTEP and RSCC into those efforts. But that really changed kind of the whole playing field really around education, because we were able to talk together as one voice about what we needed as a whole. And our first, major initiative was developing Colin's position to ensure that we had someone who was overseeing all of things manufacturing across the state and really bringing us together. And then from just that groundswell, you can see how the influence of the CMC has evolved. We've become the go-to place for an advisory panel for many different issues. We've been very fortunate to have Senator Hartley participating in our weekly calls during COVID and has remained highly engaged. And so all of those things together, I think, has really brought us from these very diverse silos to this point in time when we can really start having collective conversations that meet the needs of the whole across manufacturing in Connecticut.
Thanks, Kelly. Kurt, take us home on this one.
Yeah, just to build a little bit on what Kelly was talking about, sector partnerships. There's always been a lot of talk about sector partnerships and some action on sector partnerships, but I think that in the last year or so, with the Governor's Workforce Council and other agencies, we've been putting together a plan to really make that real. And there are great examples of sector partnerships, particularly in manufacturing already, such as the pipeline, out in Eastern Connecticut that Kelly knows very, very much about, and I'm sure we'll be talking a little bit about more, where the educational institutions from the high schools and cooperation in terms of work-based learning at the workplaces evolve up through the community colleges and with continued learning and work-based learning, apprenticeship programs in particular, through those programs evolving into very successfully trained individuals. And all these programs are employer directed, they're employer created. So we're very excited about that, and we see a lot more progress in that area. Secondly, remote learning at DOL, we sent a lot of people home when COVID hit, and we sent most people home. And with the unemployment crisis, we put a lot of people on helping out with managing claims, in March and April. Luckily, we've been able to bring them back, and we're slowly trickling employees back into the American Job Centers, where we can handle workplace training issues when we have to in the American Job Center. So that's evolving slowly. We still want to do it remotely, and we are doing it remotely, particularly with programs like 180 Skills that actually evolved from eWIB. These are remote learning platforms that are free that folks can log on to. And lastly, DOL has what we call a shared work program, wherein employers, instead of laying off folks, can just reduce the hours of some of their employees, keep the employees. DOL has a program to offer a partial unemployment benefit. So this is a win-win-win for the employees, for the tax base of Connecticut, and for the employers to retain retain those employees. And it has benefits also in that it's federally subsidized. So it won't affect your experience rating, for example, as an employer. So we've been pushing shared work, and if I get a chance, I may talk a little bit more about it later.
Great. Thank you, Kurt. All right. So Kelly, you brought it up, I think, and I heard it when I first came into government, but silos, and obviously there's a negative connotation. I've not seen it myself, but I guess my question for the three of you is, perception, it can be reality, and there is the perception, rightly or wrongly, that the state government and other parts of the government work in silos, and there is not the interaction that there needs to be to really have maximum effectiveness. So I'd love your all's take on this. True or false? Are we siloed, or are we less siloed? What's your take on that, and what needs to be done to fix it if we are siloed? So Kelly, why don't you start us off on this one?
Yeah, sure. So I think there has been a dramatic change with Governor Lamont and his administration. I mean, working with the previous administration, I felt there was a lot of silos. We didn't have cooperation and coordination that we do The community college system really was independent of each other, and each school had different programs, didn't talk to other programs. Same as with the Department of Ed and what was going on in the schools. There was no collaboration between that. Business was kind of put to the side. And so we were, trying to get our voices heard from the outside in. But all that really has changed dramatically with Governor Lamont and putting the people in place that he has put in place. His kind of more philosophy that we need data-driven decision-making, kind of thinking that more strategic vision and strategy than we had before. And that really tends to bring people together. The work that's been done on the Governor's Workforce Council, is a great example of that, in that, we've brought in our council members, our business, and we have a robust ex officio membership of government agencies and community partners. And we worked for the last year to really pull together a comprehensive strategic plan that really ensures that for our success, we all have to work together. So I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about that in a few minutes as well.
Great, thanks, Kelly. And Colin, you've seen it now from the inside for a year. What's your take on the silo question?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised at sort of the cooperation amongst the different stakeholders, and I think it starts candidly at the top, and from my perspective, somebody who's new to state government, looking at the people the governor brought into positions of decision making positions, Josh Gabal, Katie Dykes, Miguel Cardona, Kelly. These are people who don't have, pre-existing fiefdom. They're just looking to get results. And I started thinking yesterday about sort of examples of sort of interagency cooperation and public-private cooperation, partnership cooperation, and I quickly jotted down a dozen different examples, and I won't sort of monopolize the rest of our time here going through all those. But a great example would be the changes to the Connecticut Transfer Act, right? I mean, you and Katie were sort of on the front lines of that, working with Eric and other manufacturing groups and environmental groups, and working cooperatively and collaboratively to make a change there. Something that people have been talking about for 20 years. I mean, there's a great example. As Kelly mentioned, the Governor's Workforce Council, seeing I think there were over 50 people on this committee. What Garrett Moran did and Kelly did, sort of organizing that group, getting different stakeholders working together towards a common goal. And at the end of it, after a year-long process, we came out with a strategic plan that had unanimous backing on it. And if that's not an example of sort of working collaboratively and breaking down the silos, but there are innumerable examples of this. And certainly as we went through the pandemic, all of that broke down. People were working together, public, private, across state agencies. I think, arguably you can say there were more initiatives developed and implemented in a 6-month period than there probably ever has been in the history of the state business and state government. So I don't see that. Certainly there are some challenges there, but I think we've got a lot of great momentum moving away from the silos and moving to working collaboratively and cooperatively and in a coordinated manner to get results to further the cause of business in the state.
Thanks, Colin. Kurt, what's your take on the silo question?
I think Colin's right. If you look at the one common element in the Connecticut Manufacturing Report that was done for this meeting and to set a guideline for policy, the Governor's Workforce Council strategic plan. And for example, there's a Brookings Institute report that just came out the other day called FAME, F-A-M-E is the acronym. And this is a longitudinal study of the experience of Toyota in Kentucky that actually broadened to 13 other states, and they looked at outcomes of the apprenticeship program and work-based learning program there. And the outcomes were startling. We're talking about the pay outcomes, the training outcomes. What is common there is that all the silos were broken down between the high schools, the technical schools, the community colleges, with the leaders, again, being the employers directing curriculum and making that an integral part of the program. And we have the same thing here with the manufacturing pipeline that's been very successful in that. We are trying to replicate that program with the Apprentice Connecticut initiative. We've distributed funds to all of the workforce development boards to replicate not only in manufacturing, but primarily in manufacturing, the same experience we've had in EWIB. And all the parties have been very interested in that. And I think it's been successful. So I think we've made a lot of progress.
That's great, Kurt. And Kurt, let's stick with you for a second and delve a little bit deeper into this. So DOL has long had a successful, history of programs to basically enable, workers in manufacturing, apprenticeships, and the like. How is that changing? Whether it's, how is the delivery of that changing in COVID or when we get out of COVID? And talk a bit more about work-based learning and apprenticeships and how that fits in, whether what's happened in Kentucky or what we want to do here in Connecticut in the future.
Well, the beauty of workplace learning, whether it's apprenticeship programs or internships, I happen to be a huge proponent of apprenticeships, and I was really gratified to hear on the earlier panel there was a significant amount of discussion about apprenticeships, including from Pfizer. So this is not just a manufacturing phenomenon, and it's certainly not just a trades phenomenon. It's something embraced, and with it comes a lot of money from the Fed. So we think that it's important. We know that it's employer driven. In the past, apprenticeships have, at least on the manufacturing side, been linked to the MIF, the Manufacturing Innovation Fund, which has steadily declined in terms of funding, as well as incumbent worker training. Now, those two programs have been highly successful with manufacturers. I'm sure every manufacturer on this call knows pretty much about it, and these programs have worked. The transition that's happened is more towards sector based programs, and those are what I was describing a little bit earlier, wherein the sectors, including manufacturers, are identified, funds are attributed to programs that are already elucidated through the workforce boards and the manufacturers for universal training in those areas. And it's a broader approach. It's more of a sector approach, and I think it has a potential of moving the industries forward faster.
Great, thanks, Kurt. Kyle, let's go back over to you before we follow up on the Workforce Council with Kelly. So as I mentioned at the outset, exactly 1 year ago, we introduced you at this event last year in Trumbull, and you didn't know you were signing up to help with pandemic response and help manufacturers retool here and PPE procurement for that matter. But even away from that, you've gotten a lot done in your first year, and you've been a huge add for the governor and the administration. What are the 2 or 3 things you're focused on this upcoming year? MIF was mentioned by Commissioner Westby. You and I have spent a lot of time on that. I realize how important that funding is, as does Governor Lamont. But just give me a sense of where your focus is going to be the next 12 months for the industry.
All right, great. Well, yeah, certainly MIF funding is, as you know, David, we had identified a source of funds to really secure funding for that program for the next 5 years. And then the pandemic hit, and then, those funds were appropriately repurposed to more immediate needs around the state. So we were able to identify an alternate source of funds that we're, getting the final touches of sort of the administrative support for that to reactivate the MIF. But it's going to be important to get some long-term funding security behind that. So that's a priority. That we've talked about that. We'll be working together on that. I think that we've got this new initiative around the defense manufacturing communities in Connecticut. We are initiating a group called the Connecticut Defense Manufacturing Communities Consortium, which is really a steering committee focused on digital transformation of the defense manufacturing supply base. And what's great about this committee is it includes the state's three largest OEMs, defense OEMs. It includes obviously DCD and the MIF. It includes CONNSTEP and CCAT, CCSU, UConn, and then it also includes a number of sort of the trade groups. So it really is a comprehensive group that's going to be focused on digital transformation. And then within that, we've got a specific initiative of the digital model initiative, which is to implement amongst the submarine, helicopter, and jet engine supply bases, work with a group of suppliers on initiative to implement model-based definition, which is sort of a foundational technology for digital transformation, and one that's going to be required for next-gen DoD contracts. So that's a big priority. You know, we've got some interesting things going on in emerging industries. I know you're very aware of the offshore wind power. And we've got a group working to sort of develop a strategic plan and then implement initiatives. There's going to be a fair amount of economic activity in the state driven by those programs, and we want to make sure that we're focused on areas that are most beneficial to our state stakeholders on that. And then, you know, I'll also be focused on other things like supporting Kelly. She's got there's a lot of great initiatives coming out of the strategic report that's going to be released the next week, including supporting the regional sector partnerships and the career pathways, as well as access to all of our citizens to these opportunities. And then there are other ancillary things, David, as you know, you've got putting forth some legislation on helping secure access to capital. And then we'll be looking at other opportunities on select areas of regulatory reform. So no shortage of opportunities.
You're going to be a busy man, Colin, as is your way. So. And Kelly, that's a great segue to you. So similar to Colin's 1-year anniversary or birthday here with the government, the Governor's Workforce Council is also approximately a year old. And we're thrilled that you took the full-time role as executive director of that, working closely with really everyone here, as well as all the participants on this call. But give us a sneak peek, if you will. I know the big reveal is coming, but what are some of the key takeaways, initiatives specifically focused on manufacturing after the approximately 12 months of study by the Workforce Council?
Absolutely. We're really excited to be releasing our strategic plan sometime next week. There'll be an announcement with the governor. So I'll give you a sneak peek. We worked with all of our committee members and our ex officios and a lot of agency partners around this four-legged stool. So first and foremost is business leadership. And making sure that business is at the center of all of our conversations about workforce. I think there's been a real kind of shift to understanding that our businesses are our customers when it comes to workforce development. Our students are the product of our workforce development system, and we need to make sure that that system is churning out the people and the skills necessary to fill the immediate demand, and then also looking at the intermediate and long-term demands of the workforce. So you'll see in our plan, again, business leadership is at the center. Some of those initiatives are skills-based hiring, work-based learning, but central to their role across the plan is these regional sector partnerships that Kurt talked about a little while ago. And that's kind of part of the silos, breaking down those silos. So we've had, manufacturing has the most well-developed kind of sector partnerships across the state than any of our other industries. We're very well organized. We have several of our manufacturing organizations that have been around for over 100 years. So those partnerships are strong, but what we'd like to do is build upon those partnerships to add in some of the other issues around workforce that we may not have always really thought about, like the equity and access issue, the supports that people need in order to fully participate in work-based learning programs, and to help us with our educational process and how that's going to go. So how we see those partnerships working is that we have our statewide plan, and then there will be these partnerships around most likely the 5 workforce development regions in the state, and they will be the local implementers, and they will make the tweaks about what needs to happen on the specific details of implementation at the regional level. But what we want to do at the system level is create those systems in place so that those implementations can happen. Historically, every time there was an initiative, it was like recreating the wheel. So we want to build that process. So we've got business at the center. And really, we have a very robust career building program that really starts, as Shannon said earlier, K through 12, building stackable credentials to the community college, to the 4-year institutions, ensuring that we have sector training that meets the needs of our businesses, that we're including incumbent worker training, we're bringing in the adult education population and those who have maybe some other challenges and barriers to workforce entry into the system, and making sure that we have a system that builds on career awareness, career advising, and understanding that there's a large population of students that graduate and don't go on to 4-year institutions. And we've got to make sure that they are career ready, not just college ready, and that they understand what lifelong learning is, because as we know, the jobs of tomorrow are even here today. So we've got to make sure that they understand that they've got to continually upskill. So that's a core part. And the equity piece is really important. We're missing a whole segment of our population that could participate at a high level, but they have barriers to entry, such as childcare, transportation, barriers to mental health, and then we have the issue of the benefits cliff. So we really need to start addressing those equity issues and ensuring we can get those people participating. And then fourth is data management and data-driven decisions. I mean, our agencies have very antiquated systems. They don't always talk to each other, and we don't ask for the data that we need sometimes to make the decisions that we need to understand what is the return on our investment in different programs that we have across the state. So a lot of programs are kind of funded by intuition, and we think that these things are good, or we have good ROIs for a segment of the data, but we really need to be looking holistically across our state agencies and our educational systems to how our investments are panning out on the other end and how we tweak them. So we're really looking forward to all of these kind of things working together. And it requires an army of people and cooperation across the agencies with our legislators. And the reason why we were so successful in a unanimous approval of our plan is that we involved everyone in it from the beginning. And then as we were shoring up those strategic plans, we were sending them back to our state agencies for feedback to make sure that we got it right and that we're well in line with our initiatives and, again, with our legislative initiatives. So a lot of work going on. And again, some of them will be things that we can do this year. Some of them will be things we can do next year. And some of them are longer term initiatives.
Thanks, Kelly. We look forward to hearing more on that from you and the governor next week, it sounds like. So that's great. Actually, this might be, we got a question in the Q&A chat here, and talking about the silver wave or the silver tsunami, and maybe just to digress for a sec, Colin, I know you looked at some of these numbers, as Commissioner Westby, but if there's going to be a significant amount of retirements, what is with the Workforce Council, vocational schools, other training grounds that we have, what do those numbers look like? And Colin, you should start us out on this in terms of potential retirements and how we feel we can backfill those, because it feels like we are going to need to be running fast just to stay in the same place at times here.
Right. One of the first things I did when I started with the state was try to get an understanding of supply and demand in terms of the manufacturing workforce, and put together a model sort of predicting what we were going to need based on the age of the workforce, some assumptions on growth, some assumptions on productivity. And where we came out was somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 people we need a year. Obviously, the COVID, the pandemic has sort of upended that for a short period of time, but the trends driving the need, again, the demographics, which is the overwhelming factor, that remains in place. That we're going to be facing that for foreseeable future. So, we're having a period of time where we're reabsorbing the people who dislocated in the last 6 months, but long term, we need to continue to focus on developing people to enter the manufacturing workforce. And, when we looked at it, we worked at this as part of the governor's workforce council. Kelly worked on this with us. And, we identified that our capacity to train was about half of what the need was. And so identified real opportunities to sort of open up the pipeline, or as we say in manufacturing, address the bottlenecks. And that's a lot of what this plan is focused on doing, and developing new avenues to get and train new talent. But there's also this demographic shift with 35% of our manufacturing workforce is over 55 years old. We also have to be mindful of the fact that when they retire, when we have our most experienced employees retiring, even if we're successful on training and backfilling them one for one with new entrants, you're going to have a mix shift going on, highly skilled people exiting, lighter, less experienced people entering. We want to make sure that the average skill level, we can't afford to have the average skill level of our workforce decline. So things like incumbent worker training are so critical as we go through this demographic shift in our workforce. And they're also, incumbent worker training is also critical to make sure that our employees have the requisite skills to take advantage of all this new technology that's coming to bear right now in manufacturing with Industry 4.0 technologies coming. So there's a real challenge ahead of us, and the timing for this strategic report and the initiatives that are going to be launched as part of that, it's can't happen fast enough.
Great. Kelly or Kurt, I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on that. If not, I'll go to the next question here.
I'll just weigh in really quickly. I think Colin said it all. It's been a problem. We got a bit of a reprieve on that due to the COVID, and the layoffs. That doesn't mean we should slow down, because, the need for highly skilled workers has always been there, and it's going to continue to be there. We've just barely been keeping up with it, frankly, in the last few years. And one other thing I'll just add is that this is the same problem in state government. We, in terms of delivering services, to do everything we want to do to help employers, within 2 years, there's going to be a major cliff in terms of folks retiring. So we have the same problem as well.
Great, thanks, Kurt. And we just got, I'm gonna kind of bounce between my questions and audience questions here. So Jason Howie just put a very thoughtful question in the chat, which is what's the state's plan to improve the marketing of manufacturing's image to school districts, boards, teachers, guidance counselors, students, as well as parents, which we know is crucially important. So Kelly, you want to start us off with that one?
Yeah, absolutely. That's been an issue for a very long time. And, part of that is ensuring that people understand that manufacturing is turning into a very high tech. There's a blur between IT and manufacturing skills now, because manufacturing skills are becoming so IT critical. And so we've got to ensure that our guidance counselors understand that, our parents and our teachers. One of the initiatives that we have in the Governor's Workforce Council is to ensure that students are exposed to careers very early on in their educational experience, that teachers start connecting curriculum and content to the matching careers, and ensuring that students have the opportunity to do career exploration, looking at their student success plans starting in middle school and having them to be working to put together almost like career portfolios. What am I good at? What am I interested in? What's really cool that I'm learning about? And what career opportunities are there in those fields? And building in career counselors who come in and expose students to the different career opportunities that there are. I mean, it's amazing when we talk about the very cool high-tech things that happen in our buildings all over the state of Connecticut that people just drive by every day and have no comprehension of what is happening in there. I mean, I always use this as an example. My business was located a quarter of a mile from a high school, and it took me 10 years to get people from the high school to bring students into my business, and they could walk down the street and get there. So we've got to make sure that people understand that manufacturing is a high-tech field. It has growth opportunities and career opportunities, and our school systems are really starting to engage in that. And I think Colin did a really amazing initiative for Manufacturing Month this month. So maybe he wants to explain a little bit about a current initiative around that.
That's quite a segue, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, there's a lot of great work going on. I think we all know that we need a sustained campaign to win the hearts and minds of not just the students, but the educators, the counselors, the administrators, and, you know, quite frankly, the parents, right? The parents can be the biggest impediment. We need to change the perception. There are a lot of efforts going on in that end. You know, Shannon Merriman was on earlier with what they're doing at RSCC. Alice Stiles and her team at CCAT are doing some great things. There are a number of programs in the MIF that are focused on outreach. I think our biggest ally in this is Commissioner Cardona. He gets it, and his team gets it, and they've been wonderful. We reached out to them because of you know, the pandemic. A lot of the legacy programs that we did in and around Manufacturing Month, we can't do in person. And we switch like this over to a virtual format, which sometimes doesn't have the impact. But the great thing about a virtual delivery is that you get almost infinite distribution. And so we focused on really trying to get some of this, you know, focus on getting the word out into the school systems. And we actually, before Manufacturing Month started, we kicked it off with a meeting with the superintendents of the Connecticut school system and gave them a presentation on manufacturing, and talked about how it provides careers, talked about the need for to get young people into it, the attractiveness, and it was very well received. And you can tell it's very well received when you finish the presentation and then you look at the questions that come in. And there's a lot of great work going on. I think, David, you said that Jason had asked this question. You know, he's done some great work in and around New Britain. There are a lot of efforts. You know, one of the things we need to do is we need to tap into the 9,000 students that graduate from our comprehensive high schools each year that don't go into the military or on a college. That's a river of talent. We've talked about this, and there are a lot of good efforts going on to access that river of talent. Just last week, I was out at Middletown. They had sort of an open house for their new manufacturing and aerospace program. Great program there. They're talking about putting one on in North Branford. There are a number of other ones that have come to life in the last year or so. Manchester's looking at it. So, you know, the word is getting out there. We've even talked about through the CMC, again, an actual advertising campaign, again, to win the hearts and minds of the students, the educators, the administrators, the counselors, and probably most importantly, the parents. So we understand the need to do that, and there are a lot of efforts to that end.
Thank you, guys. All right, I'm going to move on to what is my last question, and then certainly for the audience that's been listening in, please feel free to drop questions in the chat, and we'll make sure the panelists get them, especially the hard ones. So last question for me, and again, at the risk of maybe oversimplifying here, where can the state be doing more as it relates to whether it's manufacturing, workforce, funding, and then where can or should the state be doing less? Where are we not being as effective if there are areas? So again, kind of free reign here. Kurt, why don't you start us out on this one?
Well, I can start off with the more part. I briefly touched on shared work at the beginning of this program. I think when you say the state, I mean Department of Labor, and I mean employers, I mean the whole state. you know, if you're an employer and you're in the tough position of maybe having to lay off workers, or if maybe you're thinking about bringing back some workers who had been laid off, we have the program of shared work, and it's a very successful program. You could lay off or bring someone back at 50%, or reduce hours 40% or 30%, and just pay that amount of money based on the percentage that they would be working. The unemployment benefit would pay the other portion, and it would not affect your experience rating. So I think that that's where we could be doing a lot more. Before the pandemic, there were maybe 300 employers a year who took advantage of that program. So far in this year, and the year hasn't even finished, there are almost 3,000 employers who have taken advantage of it, and over 24,000 employees who have taken advantage of it. And we're in the process right now of gearing up to make that program even more successful. So I think that would be a really good takeaway for anyone who is in that position.
Yeah, Kurt, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, shared work, this is a huge initiative. And as Kurt mentioned, it basically checks every box, including, importantly, getting the federal assistance and not impacting that experience rating. We can't stress that enough. For those that aren't familiar with it, please look into it and spread the word, because this is a really efficient way for the state to, be fiscally responsible and make sure that we maintain our workforces here as we navigate the pandemic. So I needed to make that plug as well. But thank you, Kurt. Kelly, why don't we go to you next? What should we be doing more of or less of?
Sure. So, more of, we have a great strategic plan, and that's something that we haven't really had before, is a statewide comprehensive plan that kind of touches almost every aspect of our state government. And we need to continue to think strategically. We need to continue to work collaboratively. And we need to focus on systematic changes. We've been nibbling around the edges for a long time, and those nibbles don't really make a statewide impact. So we've got some programs and best practices that are amazing, but let's take those, learn those best practice lessons and bring them to scale across the state. And again, when we're thinking about initiatives, especially around the legislature, making sure that we do things that do impact systematic change, like the Transfer Act, for example. And just one example of less of, in 2013, we made a legislative mandate that 70% of our residents would have a credential by 2020. Then we, in 2018, we kind of restated it to 2025 because nothing happened. And because nothing happened because it was just a statement and there was nothing underneath it to support the work to get that statement done. So yes, we still need to do that, but we need to ensure that we're building out the systems in order for us to get something like that accomplished.
Thanks, Kelly. Last but not least, Mr. Cooper.
In terms of the state, I think of sort of the state government. I think, I'd like to see obviously more funding to the MIF, which
I was going to tell you couldn't go to that one, but
yeah, going. I know. I'd be remiss on that. But
noted.
Having seen the strategic plan on workforce, governor's strategic plan, one of the brilliant things about it is it's relatively legislative light and funding light. But there is going to be some legislation that's needed to back it, and there is going to be some funding that's needed to back it. And I think we need our legislators to focus on that and get behind that. And then in terms of less, I think one of the frustrations I've seen, and I'm sure David, you've seen it, and Kelly's seeing it now, coming from the private sector to government. Things are very rigid, and they're rigid to ensure fairness and proper process and procedures, but it really prohibits the ability, as the Marines would say, to adapt and overcome. I mean, the situation on the ground changes and you need to make changes. And so what I would say is any legislation that goes forward, we ought to look to build into it some flexibility for sort of localized or departmentalized decision making should the facts on the ground change. And so I'd really like to see a little less rigidity in some of the legislation that goes forward. Understand why they do that, because they want to drive accountability, but we need to sort of balance that off on flexibility to allow the professionals in state government to make decisions based on the situation at the time.
Yeah, well said. That's a balance that I think all of us from the private sector that are in the public sector, I think, appreciate a lot more from this side. But there needs to be a balance there. We need to make sure that we're effective and not being rigid at the expense of effectiveness. But I'm hopeful that we can continue to make progress there. So I'm not sure if there's any other questions. If folks want to drop them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll probably close this out here in a second. Anything while we're seeing if there are any final questions from the audience, anything from the panelists that we didn't mention that you want to make sure we communicate before we adjourn here for lunch?
I just want to thank everybody for their continued support and involvement. It takes the involvement of everybody to accomplish our goals, and I want to just appreciate everyone for all the work that they continue to do, both private and public, and our educators and our community partners.
And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the manufacturing community. I think, Connecticut was unusual in terms of deeming all of manufacturing essential. And David, you were on the front end of that, so thank you. But the manufacturers rewarded that confidence by developing and implementing safe workplace procedures, kept the workforce safe, avoided hotspots. Also, I got a firsthand view to look at the inventiveness and stick-to-itiveness of the Connecticut manufacturing industry when the pandemic hit and companies had to pivot to use their capacity and capabilities to address critical public health issues. And again, thanks to a lot of those companies are on this phone call today. Some really, really spectacular efforts on that front. So thank you.
Yeah, very quickly, there was one quote I heard from Brian Montanari earlier in this program, and he said, "What we do for our families, we do for our employees," and that really hit home for me. And I think that attitude, which was replicated a few times in that earlier section, says it all in terms of what the manufacturing industry has done in Connecticut to stay ahead of this thing. Hats off to you. It's been impressive, and I just want to say that DOL is here as a resource to the manufacturers here in Connecticut. So don't be shy in terms of asking for anything. Thank you.
Great. Well, Kurt, Kelly Marie, Colin, thank you very much for everything you're doing, and really appreciate Chris, CBIA. Thanks for having us on here right now. I'll extend my thanks to the full group, and I know you got some manufacturing awards here to give out right after us. So we appreciate the time and look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks to the four of you, and I look forward to working with you further.
Thank you.
So there you are, Steve. I see Steve Litchfield, so Regional Vice President of Commercial Lending at TD Bank. And Steve, thanks for joining us. I want to again just reiterate my thanks to you and Michael and TD Bank for your support of this summit and of the amazing manufacturing awards that you're about to present. And Steve, we've talked about this. Even in these unprecedented times, the Connecticut manufacturers are really just a bright spot, a beacon, if you will, of light. And the manufacturing awards really symbolize all the positive things that are going on with Connecticut manufacturers. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you. And thanks again, Steve.
Sure. And good morning, Chris, and thank you. And good morning to everyone. It's been a great discussion this morning. And as you say, there's just a lot of activity in our community. People we talk about all the time, pivoting, making changes every day, and the lights stay on. So congratulations to all the manufacturers out there. It's my pleasure this morning to present two awards, one in the category of manufacturing innovation and one in next generation leadership. Our first award is in the category of manufacturing innovation. This award recognizes manufacturing companies that demonstrate initiative and leadership in working with local schools and their communities to expand awareness of manufacturing as a career and provide manufacturing training opportunities to traditional high school students. And this award goes to Sonatech. Founded in 1989, Sonatech specializes in the manufacturing of heat staking machines ultrasonic welders, and air presses. In recent months, Sonatech has stepped up in the fight against the 2019 novel coronavirus, or COVID-19. Sonatech offers ultrasonic welding, tooling, and automation for joining, cutting, and sealing of non-woven materials like N95 masks and other personal protective equipment. And the company's employees have been working around the clock in order to help their customers make more ventilators, face masks, and testing equipment, many of the vital products that will help save and protect lives. To accept the award, please allow me to introduce Steve St. Bishop, Financial Controller, and his brother Thomas St. Bishop, Technology Manager.
Good morning to everyone attending this year's Manufacturing Summit, and thank you, Steve Litchfield, for the introduction. We hope that you and yours are well and safe during this pandemic. We would like to take a moment to thank CBIA, CONNSTEP, and ReadyCT for presenting Sonatech with the Manufacturing Innovation Award. It truly is an honor. My name is Stephen Bishop, and I'm the Financial Controller here at Sonatech, and my brother, Thomas Bishop, who is our Technology Manager, is accepting this award on behalf of our founder and father, Mr. Robert Bishop, who could not be here today for this prestigious award. As a small business in Connecticut, we value family above all else. We work hard to create a family environment, which is difficult to maintain due to COVID and social distancing. To all of us here at Sonatech, our local community is like family, and this is why Sonatech works so closely with our local schools. More specifically, we work very closely with Platt Tech High School in Milford. Dave Tuttle, the head of Precision Machining, has been collaborating with Sonatech for years, and we are so grateful for Dave and Platt Tech. 20% of our engineering and machining departments have roots from Platt Tech. Sonatech has extended internships and apprenticeships to those high school students who have received training and have been provided with all of the tools necessary to succeed. Without Dave and Platt Tech and the state apprenticeship program, we would not be as successful or as large and not have been able to provide as many jobs as we did here in Connecticut. Our relationship with our local community has raised awareness in manufacturing as a career, and as you all know, is a vital role in the success of manufacturing in Connecticut. Although we have less than 50 employees here, we have many employees, 20 specifically, that have been here for over 10 years. That's 40% of our workforce. Of those 20 employees, 10 of them have been here for over 20 years. To us, it speaks volume to the culture here at Sonatech, and we attribute a lot of that to our family values and through the collaboration with our local schools and community. Through initiative, leadership, and innovation, we can work together to increase awareness in making manufacturing a career choice. Thank you again for this award. Thanks. Thank you, Stephen.
Congratulations, Steve and Thomas. Great work, and certainly current with all the changes that you've made in your operation. So congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Our next award is in the category of Next Generation Leadership. This award honors remarkable manufacturing professionals 30 years old or younger, who inspire youth in traditionally underserved communities, including minority communities, individuals with special needs, or individuals who are or have been incarcerated, to explore careers in manufacturing. And this award goes to Merrick Lankarge, a mold making apprentice at Somerset Plastics. I would like to introduce owner Cliff White, who will tell us a little more about Somerset Plastics and Merrick. Good morning and welcome, Cliff.
There you go. Hello.
Yep, you're on. Good morning.
All right. We bring on apprentices every so often, and we use Vinyl Tech usually to find them. They seem to work great, and Merrick's proceeding very good. That's why we set them up for this, and I'll let Merrick take over now.
You gotta talk about it. Hey, Merrick. Firstly, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I am excited to be a part of the manufacturing community, and being recognized helps allow young people to stay interested in the field It shows that the industry wants to be current with the latest technologies and the ways of bringing new talent to the industry. Involving young people can give a fresh perspective in which can lead mutually beneficial relationships for not just the company, but also paving the way for the next generation to come. There's also many opportunities for young people in the trade today. I've started my mold maker apprenticeship at Somerset about 2 years ago, and I've loved it ever since. It was all made possible by my high school vinyl tech, and by the help of my shop teacher, put me in the school's work-based learning program. This allows for students to go to work during school while still earning credits. This was a huge benefit for me because I was still able to go to school, and I was still also able to get job experience at the same time. It was also a good way for me to be able to see what my future holds and my foreseeable career. I am looking forward to my future at Somerset Plastics and what the next couple of years hold for me in this industry. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Merrick. And if, just about every panel discussion this morning talked about individuals like you and the support from the local community schools and colleges and universities. So congratulations on your success, and you've got a long career ahead of you. So look forward to seeing more of you. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Bonnie. Congratulations to our award winners this morning.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, and congratulations, Tom and Steve and Merrick and Cliff. Wonderful, wonderful to see you and to listen to what you had to say. I want to wrap things up here and thank everybody. Thank all our panelists. Again, thank you, Steve, TD Bank. A big shout out to Stanley Black Decker for support. Everyone that was on the panel, our state representatives. Again, reading the report and reading national reports, we're right up there with a booming economy in manufacturing. And I think the initiatives and all the participants that you heard today, it really is a work in process and a really collaborative effort. And I just want to end by saying there was a lot of mention of the CMC today. I would be remiss if I didn't give a big shout out to CBIA's former president, Joe Brennan, whose idea this was a few years back when just a handful of us sat around his table in his office to bring these groups together and start what I'll call a small movement for manufacturing. So with that, I wish everybody a great afternoon and safe, be well, take care of your families, and peace to all of you. Thanks.